This week's episode of Couch Potatoes Unite! Is sponsored by Found Penny Studio. Found Penny Studio is exclusively fulfilling our Patreon Tier 3 merchandise perk by doing what they do best, creating to celebrate everyday moments like your favorite TV series. Check out Found Penny Studio's creations at foundpennystudio.com and find Couch Potatoes Unite on Patreon at www.patreon.com/couchpotatoesunite.
You say you want to watch a drama. You say you want to watch a comedy. Well, you can watch it with your mama. Or you can watch it with your daddy.
You'll even sit and watch it with your middle schooler. So you can come and talk around a water cooler. We're watching all day and all night.
Couch Potatoes Unite.
Whoa, whoa.
Couch Potatoes Unite.
Whoa, whoa. Couch Potatoes Unite.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the podcast entitled Couch Potatoes Unite! Which is based on a blog of the same name because perhaps it's our way of breaking better. That joke won't land for a hot second, but just give it a chance to percolate. My name is Kylie and I love TV. If you feel the same, keep listening and or checking out our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, as you're bound to find some common ground or something you like. For Couch Potatoes Unite, we're all about the wonders and the unique long-form storytelling of the small screen. CPU, ! Hopes you've been following releases of brand new episodes of the podcast on Wednesdays, as well as new blog entries on some Tuesdays, and as always, we have several more new episodes on the way. Because the panelists and I live lives behind our podcast, the episodes are published once per week. Subscribe to the website or the podcast via iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, via Google Play, Spotify, and iHeartRadio and CastBox to stay on top of brand new episodes. Episodes already published discuss a variety of shows around the water cooler, including but not limited to Supernatural, Orange is the New Black, Gotham, the Marvel shows on Netflix, Stranger Things, iZombie, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, The Good Place, The Crown, Game of Thrones, American Horror Story, Grace and Frankie, Altered Carbon, and Mr. Robot. Plus, new episodes are in the works, including revisits for Doctor Who, Schitt's Creek, Westworld, Fuller House, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, Will and Grace. We'll be launching new panels covering This Is Us, The Orville, Big Little Lies, and The Good Doctor. And because we look back at shows now past, we'll travel through time and experience all sorts of identities with Quantum Leap, and we'll thank the Golden Girls for being friends. By the way, did you know that CPU also from time to time goes live? We've been live from bunkers, comedy shows, Comic-Cons, and game stores. Plus, we're planning more live appearances and other cool stuff, including in these semi-quarantine times. So make sure you like or follow us at our Facebook page, our Twitter at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, or subscribe to the website, our YouTube channel, our Apple iTunes channel, our Stitcher Radio channel, or find us on Google Play, Spotify, CastBox, and iHeartRadio. In the meantime, if you don't hear your show in this podcast format, fellow panelists and I still write reviews, and we always seek new panelists. So if you have any interest in joining the discussion, say hello by finding us at any of those outlets I've mentioned. At the very least, stop by and leave us a thumbs up, comment, or review. We like feedback. You just better say our name when you give it up. Yeah, that's right. Bish. Yeah, I was trying to put Walter and Jesse together there. I don't know if that worked. Oh well. Today's panel and I are launching a new Looking Back series as requested by several of our resident Couch Potatoes and Couch Potatoes adjacent. If you aren't already aware, from time to time, CPU will be choosing shows of all types, but usually of some fame or notoriety to reminisce about, and to consider whether or not they age gracefully, like Gus Fring on an average business day, or don't hold up as well, like Walter White on an average business day, because he's had a lot of ups and downs. As such, this is another chapter of our Looking Back podcast episodes, wherein we review a show that has been gone, either via natural end or cancellation for some time. And this is but one chapter in a multi-part series in which we will explore all shows in one multi-show universe, specifically the entire universe spawned by the show Breaking Bad. In fact, today in our first discussion, we'll be looking back at one of the most critically acclaimed and popularly watched dramas of all time, a program which spawned a prequel and a sequel film, and therefore our series launching today, which we are calling Breaking Better. Ah, there's the punchline. Today, in the first episode of our series, we'll be discussing seasons 1, 2, and 3 of the titular drama itself, Breaking Bad. Each new episode in this new CPU podcast universe will progress through subsequent seasons of Breaking Bad, the aforementioned prequel, Better Call Saul, and the sequel movie produced by Netflix last year entitled El Camino. Furthermore, I will be splitting moderation duties with one of our panelists, though as things often work around here, yours truly, your friendly neighborhood chief couch potato, and the operations chief cook, you heard me, will be kicking the whole thing off. Also, at various points in this mega series, we'll present top 5 best and bottom 5 worst episode lists around various themes chosen by the moderator in question, as we tend to do with our retrospective series. We can't get started without a tiny bit of plot summary and praise, though, so let's talk Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad is an American neo-Western crime drama television series created and produced by Vince Gilligan. The show aired on AMC from 2008 to 2013 for 5 seasons and a total of 62 episodes. It was set and filmed in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and tells the story of Walter White, played by Bryan Cranston, an underemployed and dispirited high school chemistry teacher who is struggling with a recent diagnosis of stage 3 lung cancer. White turns to a life of crime, partnering with his former student Jesse Pinkman, played by Aaron Paul, by producing and distributing crystallized methamphetamine to secure his family's financial future before he dies, while navigating the dangers of the criminal underworld. The title is a Southern colloquialism meaning to turn to a life of crime. Gilligan characterized this series as showing Walter's transformation from a soft-spoken Mr. Chips type into a Scarface. To wit, Walter White is a meek high school science teacher who transforms into a ruthless player in the local methamphetamine drug trade, driven by a desire to provide for his family after being diagnosed with the cancer. Initially making only small batches of meth with his former student Jesse in a rolling meth lab, Walter and Jesse eventually expand to make larger batches of a special blue meth that is incredibly pure and creates high demand. Walter takes on the name Heisenberg to mask his identity. Because of his drug-related activities, Walter eventually finds himself at odds with his family, the Drug Enforcement Administration through his brother-in-law Hank Schrader, played by Dean Norris, the local gangs and the Mexican drug cartels, and the regional distributors, putting his life at risk. Among the show's co-stars are Anna Gunn and R.J. Mitty as Walter's wife Skyler and son Walter Jr., and Betsy Brandt as Skyler's sister Marie Schrader. Others include Bob Odenkirk as White and Pinkman's sleazy lawyer Saul Goodman, Jonathan Banks as private investigator and fixer Mike Ehrmantraut, and Giancarlo Esposito as drug kingpin Gus Fring. Breaking Bad's first season received generally positive reviews, while the rest of its run received universal acclaim, which would make critics laud it as one of the greatest television series of all time. It had moderate viewership in its first 3 seasons, but the 4th and 5th seasons saw a significant rise in viewership when it was made available on Netflix just before the 4th season premiere. By the time that the series finale aired, it was among the most watched cable shows on American television. The show received numerous awards, including 16 Primetime Emmy Awards, 8 Satellite Awards, 2 Golden Globe Awards, 2 Peabody Awards, 2 Critics' Choice Awards, and 4 Television Critics Association Awards. Cranston won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Drama Series 4 times, while Aaron Paul won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Drama Series 3 times. Anna Gunn won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Drama Series twice. In 2013, Breaking Bad entered the Guinness World Records as the most critically acclaimed show of all time. In fact, Breaking Bad appears on several best-of lists, followed by CPU. To wit, in 2013, TV Guide ranked Breaking Bad number 9 on their list of the 60 greatest shows of all time. The Writers Guild of America ranked Breaking Bad as 13th of its 101 best-written TV shows in 2013. Empire magazine ranked Breaking Bad number 2 of the 50 greatest TV shows in 2016. The Hollywood Reporter ranked Breaking Bad number 2 on its 100 favorite shows list, and Rolling Stone magazine ranked it number 3 on its list of the 100 greatest TV shows of all time. Better Call Saul, a prequel series featuring Odenkirk, Banks, and Esposito reprising their Breaking Bad roles, debuted on AMC on February 8, 2015, and has been renewed for a 6th and final season. The sequel film, El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie starring Aaron Paul, was released on Netflix and in theaters on October 11, 2019. CPU will be covering both vehicles in this series. Today, in part 1 of our multi-part Breaking Better series, our supersized crew of Breakers of Bad, including 4 frequent panelists, 1 occasional panelist, and 1 brand new voice, and your very involved moderator, will talk about the finer and less fine points of all seasons of Breaking Bad and eventually Better Call Saul and El Camino. In this episode, we'll be focusing specifically upon seasons 1 through 3 of Breaking Bad. It should be noted that all of our panelists have viewed Breaking Bad at least through season 3 and may discuss sensitive plot points. So for those of you who have not watched Breaking Bad and plan to do so, listen at your own risk as there may be major spoilers. At this time, I'd like to introduce the panel. This is how it works. They know this or might know this. Listener, I'd like to remind you as well as them. I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves by their first name, just their first name. We don't need your life story. Your first name is good. And then tell us how you came to watch Breaking Bad. What made you start watching? How did you find out about it? What kept you watching? Have you watched all of it? This is a very good foundational question for today's panel. Tell us the story of how you discovered the show, and then I'd like you to rate your interest in the show at the beginning as you started watching Breaking Bad along the standard CPU character question, which changes with each show we do, which I'm about to read. Are you ready, panel?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So how would you, that sounds very enthusiastic, by the way, and I'm very excited. How would you rate your interest in Breaking Bad as you started watching the series? Would you say you were practically obsessed with this show? How could you not be? What's more riveting than watching an otherwise upstanding high school chemistry teacher, upstanding should be in quotes, descend into the madness of the drug trade and related money laundering as he becomes more and more seduced by the thrill of illegal activity? You only wish you could be a bigger part of the magic, or that it would have lasted longer. At least there's an equally excellent prequel to enjoy now too, like Saul Goodman. This show is superb. How could it not be, since you only do business with the best? You're a professional and can recognize expert craftsmanship and entertainment when you see it, even when the presentation lacks a certain grace. So much so that when it's right, you're willing to make a sizable investment for what you expect to receive in dividends upon dividends. In your opinion, there are no greater dividends for a television viewer than those gained upon watching this series, no matter its perceived warts, like Gustavo or Gus Fring. You like the show a lot. Sometimes you find it funny, even a little goofy, despite the serious and dangerous subject matter revolving around the manufacture and distribution of crystal and the related addiction that some characters experience. To that end, this series also breaks your heart more times than you normally would want from your television, but these reactions never deterred you from coming back for more, like Jesse Pinkman. You generally enjoy the show, and especially the main characters, even if the story can be confusing and not adequately fill in the blanks sometimes, like Walter White Jr., aka Flynn. You watched Breaking Bad because you felt you had no other choice, and though your reactions could be described as complicated at best, the show still got under your skin in ways you didn't expect. At times, though the main characters are all morally flawed, watching their respective evolutions, or regressions in some cases, made you feel more alive than you've ever felt, even if the show burned bright at first in your estimation before fading out too quickly, like Walter White. You think this show is decent? You suspect that others have overhyped it, and that it's not the breakthrough that everyone thinks, but you at least appreciate how the show demonstrates that not everything or everyone operates in black and white terms, even if some behaviors or actions or choices would be seen as unquestionably wrong by a large section of society. Still, you think the series could use more comedy, and that it could be funnier than it actually is, like Hank Schrader. The show has its moments of real wisdom and clarity, though often it feels messy, requiring the use of special services to clean up the mess. Still, you've kept an eye on it all these years because it's better than a hole in your eye and doesn't feel like a waste of time. Even if it sometimes leaves you shaking your head in disbelief, like Mike Ehrmantraut, you're not sure what to make of the show. You watch it, but you don't trust it, and feel skeptical about the premise, the plot, and the main characters. In fact, you can't decide if this show is criminally overrated or the very essence of art. Still, you resigned yourself to see it through, like Skylar White. Or you watch the show, but believe that any self-respecting television viewer can do so much better when it comes to their TV watching, even if they have to steal it to watch it, like Marie Schrader. Who would like to start?
My name's Nick.
Hi, Nick.
Hi, Nick.
Hi. It's so long since I watched this for the first time. I'm trying to remember how I came to watch it, and I really think just a combination of it was one of the few things on Netflix when I got Netflix that looked interesting. I heard good things, and Also, I really liked Bryan Cranston, but I only had known him comedically from Seinfeld and Malcolm in the Middle. So that was interesting to me. And of course, being an X-Files fan, I was interested in what our buddy Vince was doing. So I believe that's the best I can give you on how I started watching it. I have seen all seasons of Breaking Bad. I have not started Better Call Saul or seen El Camino.
Plenty of time.
And then I believe that I am Jesse Pinkman, because I do like this show a lot, but the part of the description that resonates with me is it breaks your heart more times than you normally want from your television show. I find this show to be really one of the closest shows to perfect in so many ways of how it's been created, but it also is like, it's too much for me. It's too much suspense, drama, angst, all of it, that it's kind of why I haven't gone on to the next series yet, even though I'm really glad Better Call Saul exists and can't wait to watch it. What did I miss?
I think you got it all. Welcome back, Nick. Nick, you are our second most involved panelist. Would you like to give a taste of some of the panels you're on?
Sure. X-Files, Star Trek, MASH, Lemony Snicket, DC, Marvel.
I don't know.
There's just so many he can't remember. Well,
Futurama.
Welcome back, Nick, I guess. Who would like to go next?
I'll go next.
Okay.
I am Nate.
Hi, Nate.
Hi. I heard about this show on my podcast that I host. My panelists at the time talked about it quite a bit, and I was like, yeah, I saw it, but I didn't want it to just be Dexter with crystal meth. They were like, no, things go really bad right away. And so I was like, all right, I'll check it out. And then I proceeded to stay up until like 3 o'clock in the morning, binge watching, because I had a job at 9 in the morning. So I would stay up very late watching so I could be ready for the season or the series finale. Because I actually started watching, I binge watched and caught up to watch the series finale live. It was just, I was hooked. I'm definitely Saul Goodman. I'm Saul Goodman all day. In many aspects of my life, too. That's what's weird. We also got our law degree from American Samoa. Oh, spoiler.
It's fine.
Edit that out. Edit that part out. I'm just an absolutely huge fan. I also appear on the Riverdale podcast because deep down I am a 13-year-old girl. And so
You're Saul Goodman and a 13-year-old girl?
Yes. Yeah. Very popular. That's another great show that I really am all in on. But yes, that is me in a nutshell, right? That's all the questions for right now?
I think that's all the questions. Welcome back, Nate.
Thank you.
Does the person who addressed Nate in such a manner want to go next?
Sure, why not?
Okay.
This is Hillary. Hello.
Hi,
Hello.
This is Hillary.
Hello.
Hi. So I came to watch Breaking Bad, I think technically because of Kyle, even though I too am a huge X-Files fan, and there's obviously Vince created it, Vince Gilligan, but there's also a lot of other creative minds behind the show that also came from the X-Files. But I still think that Kyle had already heard a lot of buzz about it. Maybe, didn't you buy the first season and then we binged it?
So essentially, the first season had just ended. The second season was a month away, and the first season came out on Blu-ray, and I just bought it because of the critical reviews.
Literally.
So we watched it just in time to get in on season 2, and we watched it live from then on.
Yeah, so after season 1, because we watched season 1, I think, in pretty much a day. I mean, it is 7 episodes, but that's how well we enjoyed it. And then after that, we watched it in real time to the very end. Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. In terms of, should I say what other podcast I do first, or should I just go into what characters I am with it?
Whatever you feel like. We should mention that Kyle just spoke a moment ago. Do you want to do the disclaimer now?
Sure, I'm rusty. It's been a while. So, Kyle, who you just heard talk, is my husband, and I am also the moderator's sister. So there may be some elements throughout the podcast because of that.
Dynamics.
With that being said, I do, since I like, we binged it all, and we pretty much became obsessed with it after that point. I would say that I started off mostly as Gus, because I just was like, I was just so impressed with pretty much every creative aspect of the show from the get-go, the acting from the get-go, and it hooked me pretty quickly. And then by the second season, I pretty much became Saul Goodman as well, and became very obsessed with the show. I had to know what was going to happen. It was almost like the X-Files level, where I was like, don't bother calling me while the show is on, because I'm not going to answer you unless it's an emergency. So that's pretty much where I landed there, and that just continued on. I have seen all 5 seasons of Breaking Bad. As we just said, we watched it in real time. I have not seen all of Better Call Saul yet. I did see...
Which is frustrating when I want to talk to somebody about it.
My husband will probably mention a few times that he's obsessed with the character of Saul Goodman and that spin-off series.
You'll get your turn!
Yeah, geez.
It's taken too long.
Dynamics.
You had your chance. So yeah, so you're throwing me off. Yeah. So I've seen all of it. I've seen El Camino. It's all very good. I will catch up with Better Call Saul eventually. That's it, right?
What other panels have you been on, Hillary, my sister?
Gosh. I've been on quite a few of them now as well. I started with the X-Files, as we mentioned earlier. I've also done all the DC Marvel, Broadchurch, Friends. Gosh, what else have I done at this point? I've done a lot, not as many as Nick, but I've still done quite a bit. I'm starting to lose track as well. I do tend to lead towards a lot of the nerdy ones, but I still branch out from that as well. So,
welcome back, Hillary, and just for closure on the dynamics, I think Kyle should talk next.
Okay, hi, I'm Kyle. We covered how I started to watch it because it tied in with Hillary. But I'm definitely Saul Goodman. I love the world that this show created. Even more so how they filled it in brilliantly later in the sequel series. But I love every character. All the side characters are great. They just picked perfect character actors to make this world come alive. So it's not just Walt and Jesse. You get hooked with them, but then you fall in love with everybody. I mean, like, look how amazing Gus is and Mike and everybody. And I'm just absolutely obsessed with this world, and I just think it's brilliant. And I can rewatch this show over and over and over again.
And he has.
And I do. And there's just so many little things that, like, you don't even notice. Kind of like how, like Game of Thrones even, where it's like the more you rewatch it, the more things you miss, the more brilliant foreshadowing you see. So it's just a perfect show. And definitely in my top 3 below Better Call Saul, which is my all-time favorite. So yes, definitely I'm Saul Goodman. Very obsessed.
Kyle, I believe you are currently our 4th most involved panelist. Which panels have you been on?
Pretty much all the comic book ones, because I'm very nerdy that way. Anything with superheroes, X-Files, Star Trek, a bunch of them.
Angel Buffy.
Oh yeah, Angel Buffy. Very excited for the Quantum Leap one. Can't wait till we get to that.
Yes, Kyle and Nick will both be on the Quantum Leap panel when we launch it. Welcome back, Kyle.
My name is Julianne.
Hi, Julianne.
Hello. I'm trying to think back. So when I started watching Breaking Bad, I had been hearing all this buzz. It was when the show was currently airing, I think in the last season. And it was just one of those, I think one of the first shows I had heard people just kind of obsess over. And I'm like, what is this? So once they released it on a Netflix, that's when I started to jump onto the bandwagon, and I was hooked. I mean, I'm definitely Saul when it comes to the character questions. And I would say a mix of Jesse too, because this is a very emotionally exhausting and intense story. And I remember sitting down watching it for the first time and completing the series and thinking to myself, I have to get back to watching this show at some point. But man, it took a lot out of me. So I have to prepare myself in order to watch it again. But yeah, to me, Breaking Bad is a show that I hold as a standard up against a lot of other shows. So when I think about a complete story, I think there's a lot of shows that get really surprised that they have a second season. They're like, oh my God, we made it to a second season. And they don't really know what to do with that. And the feeling I always got out of Breaking Bad was there was an intentionality there. There was a complete story in mind, and you are just taken along for this journey. So to me, it's definitely in a top 3 of all time. I've also watched not all of Better Call Saul, but I think at least up until season 2, and what I've seen is absolutely excellent. And I've watched El Camino as well, and that was, I can't say much about it because it's post where we're at right now, but yeah, it's fantastic. So yeah, I'm definitely Saul when it comes to, I'm practically obsessed with this show. This is one I recommend to people all the time, but it's very intense. It's an experience. And I just wrapped up season 3 yesterday for the second time, going back through this show. And I was like, no, I'm still thinking about it. Like, I got to start season 4. So I've been watching season 4 today. So I can't stop. And I don't want to.
It's kind of what happens.
It is. It's just so dang good. And now watching it on the second time through, there's all these things that I can appreciate now, especially like some of the technical elements of the show, how it's shot, some of the music that's involved, some of the little characterizations that maybe I missed on the first time around, and I'm picking it up, and it just really kind of, it's a show that rewards you for rewatching it, I think.
I agree with that 100%.
Julianne, this is a return trip to the water cooler for you as well. What other panels have you been on?
Yes, so I've been on Mr. Robot, which is proof that I love intense television. And then I was also on Altered Carbon.
Which also falls in the intense television category.
Oh, yeah, also falls into intense television, more in the sci-fi realm. I'm a nerd as well, but I'm definitely like a nerd about the intense drama television, I think. So, yeah. Drama.
Fair enough. Welcome back, Julianne.
Thank you.
And then we have a new panelist. Hi.
Hello. Great to be here. My name is Devin.
Hi, Devin.
Hello. Great to see you all. Yeah, the intense drama are the exact 3 words I say after every episode of Breaking Bad. Just sitting there on my couch, really feeling every bit of emotion going into whatever episode I'm watching. I actually started watching this show because I was working undercover in a meth ring, and I really needed research for it, so I just decided to go right in. No, I'm just kidding. I actually...
that would be the coolest story ever.
Yeah, I needed some real hardcore research, so really just dove right into
Just continue to run with it, man.
I actually got hooked because my friend came to me with the second season on DVD, and this is right around when I started to catch wind of the AMC TV world with Walking Dead and some other shows that have become really big on that network. And he was like, my friend who had the DVD said, "Oh, you got to watch this. It's amazing television." And I said, "Okay." So I decided to catch up. Got through the first season just so I could, eventually progress my way to the second season, and there were just so many great things to say about it. I would say the acting and the cinematography and the writing of the characters were the first 3 things that drew me into the show and why I knew it was going to be quality television. Eventually, I got around to watching all seasons. It was a long process because, that 5th season got released pretty slowly while it was airing. So I really had to wait a while because after the 3rd season, I started picking it up on Netflix, and I had to wait for a while in order to go ahead and complete everything. But I got there. I also watched El Camino, which was an excellent film. Can't wait to talk about that. And I went ahead, I'm about, I think, 3 seasons into Better Call Saul right now, so really enjoying that as well. And I would say for me, this show in particular and what character I'm like, with my feelings on it, would be Gus, because this show is at a 96% purity. And for our purposes, 90% will do. So, yeah. It was just, there are so many great things to consider this project really quality. I mean, so many details that are overlooked in aspects of American television that you just don't see focused on. This show did it, so I was very excited about that.
All right. Well, welcome to the podcast and to the panel, Devin.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, my name is Kylie. I am moderating as well as participating today on this panel, as is often the case. How did I start watching Breaking Bad? Well, this is a great story, you see, because Breaking Bad is not what I would normally say would be in my wheelhouse in terms of the first kind of TV that I would pick up. And even though I'd heard a bunch of critical acclaim and I knew that I would eventually watch it, it wasn't one that I was in a rush to watch because I pick up the sci-fi and the fantasy and the mystery and the horror and stuff like that faster than I pick up stuff about a drug maker. I'm just being honest. Anyway, but then along came a podcast called Couch Potatoes Unite, and a bunch of panelists, many of whom are on this panel, who said, have we talked about Breaking Bad yet? And I said, not yet, but we will, because it's one of the most critically acclaimed TV shows of all time, and I knew I had to watch it eventually, and so I have. But as a result, I am moderating somewhat blind. Everybody else has seen the whole series at least once. I have seen the first 3 seasons. I am caught up to today, and I would kindly ask you not to spoil anything, because if I was to rate myself along the standard CPU character question right now, I would give myself 2, which if Nick's wife were here, who is also one of our panelists, she would judge me profusely for picking multiples, but I don't care. I'm moderating. So I'm going to pick 2.
Peter.
Too bad. And the 2 I'm going to pick today are Gus and Jesse. Gus, because I recognize that it is brilliant. In fact, I told Hillary and Kyle, as you know, we're related somehow, that in the first season I was like, I'm not sure about this, what's going to happen? And then by the end of the 3rd season I was like, damn it, that got under my skin, and now I have to watch more. And so that's kind of where I'm at. Plus, it is breathtakingly shot. There's a lot of great production elements to it. The pacing is one of the best paced television shows I've ever watched. They really paid attention to that, which I think is a testament to its excellence, and we'll get to that as well. So I think I'm Gus in that sense, but I'm also Jesse for the exact same reason that Nick is. I recognize its excellence, but it also really breaks my heart and is emotionally draining, as Julianne says, and so yeah, I want to keep going, but there are those times when I need to just pause for a minute before I jump into the next one, because I'm like, man, this is heavy, as Marty McFly would say. So welcome to the panel. We are part of the Breaking Better panel on CPU. We're going to be talking about Breaking Bad first, and we will get to Better Call Saul, and we will talk about El Camino. But today we're talking about seasons 1 through 3 of Breaking Bad. This is one of our retrospective series, which means that we are going to hit on each of the seasons individually, maybe not as in-depth, or maybe as in-depth. It depends on how passionate we are, each of the seasons, and then we'll just kind of go from there. We're going to talk about the show in general first, though, before we start breaking it down. So I know you kind of hinted at it with your identifying yourself and choosing your character question. We have several Saul Goodmans on the panel. But talk about what you love and what, if anything, you don't like about Breaking Bad.
First, I want to say I'm kind of bummed there was no Badger and Skinny Pete option.
They're not part of the regular cast, Kyle.
They're so important.
Look, there is a question later about who are your favorite recurring characters, at which point you go right ahead on that one.
Nice.
That's your contribution? Okay.
I was just making a statement.
Just to troll. Yeah, you know, I'm with him on this. I think it's missing. We need to focus on this and dethrone you as the moderator. I think that's what the podcast is.
Fine. That's fine. Who'd like to go? Here's the headset.
All right, you can mail it to me.
All right.
So with this show, what do we love? What do we hate? That is a long answer. No, I'm going to try and condense it as best I can. I mean, there's so much to talk about, you know. Even in the first 3 seasons, there's just so much to unfold. Obviously, like I said, the top main things I'm always going to hit are, the cinematography, the performances, and how the characters are written. Each character, Badger and Skinny Pete included, have a great function to the show that keeps that story going. Vince Gilligan did not shy away with adding great details that really humanize each character and make you identify with somebody on the show. Somebody's going to speak to you and reach out to you and kind of have you go along with their story, depending on your personality type. And I think that is just so great that they were able to touch that. What do you hate? I guess I hate the fact that I'm enjoying watching as dark of a world and as horrible of a world as it is, and rooting for characters that essentially most of them are terrible people. I mean, by our normal societal standards, you know, they're doing things that we would strongly disapprove of and would never affiliate ourselves with those kinds of people, but we just want to keep going in because we know there's that human side to them. We know that they have moments where they're good people. And it does kind of always, I always hate myself for really rooting for somebody and then they do something terrible and it's just, you know, you're going to eventually forgive them, but you really shouldn't. That's really about it. Yeah, love and hate for me.
I think the amazing thing, especially Breaking Bad, is you're watching a show who the main character is a monster. He starts out more likable, but you're slowly learning just how inhuman he really is, and then learning about all these other characters, and nobody is who you think they are when you first meet them. Nobody. Hank, Marie, Skinny Pete, Badger, the villains, Saul Goodman. Like, nobody is who they are on the surface level. Everybody is something completely different. And then the most shocking, obviously, is Walt himself, this high school teacher who is a sociopath, and he's kind of
true narcissist.
Yeah, he's kind of finally letting out the rage and everything he's been holding back his entire life, but you still love to watch him.
Yeah, it's a weird because usually we're watching shows to watch characters evolve a very different direction. I feel like that's most of the time I feel like what I sign up for. And yeah, I found myself even with a show like that, because I would still argue that this is not necessarily something that I would always immediately jump on, honestly. But at the same time, it's like I couldn't. It's like once I got into, I mean, it's basically like a freight train. I've actually told other people while recommending it that it's basically a nonstop crescendo. Like it starts at a point, and it hits that climax. And like, I don't remember who said it already. Maybe it was even a couple people jointly, but that probably more than any other show that I've seen on TV, and I would probably even lump in some of my other most favorite shows of all time, it has to be one of the best mapped stories and character development that I've probably ever seen. And Kyle says it all the time that it ends probably more we won't get there till later, but as far as shows go, it still ends more satisfyingly than most other things. So I think that in and of itself, but to get into like the real nitty gritty, we'd probably have to start breaking down by each season so I can get into points. But overall, I can't say there really isn't a whole lot that I quote unquote hate about it. I think it's really hard to, I mean, yes, it's heavy subject matter, but sometimes it's almost like we need that heavy subject matter to keep things in perspective, especially now in the world that we're in. So there's always crazy stuff happening. It's interesting to see it from these perspectives that maybe you would never think about yourself under other circumstances. So
yeah, I was gonna say, watching Breaking Bad for the first time, it's one of the first anti-hero stories I remember watching, and I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know it when it started. So as things escalate and as they continue, I started to ask myself, you know, why do I see what Walt is doing and I see what all these characters are doing, but why is there a part of me that still wants his plans to succeed? What is it? And so something about, especially like that anti-hero story, for me, this was like watching the first example of that. And now, I mean, gosh, that's everywhere in television. And not to say that it wasn't there before, but I think the way that they did it with Walt's journey, it became iconic for a reason.
Yeah, they kind of innovated it a little bit.
Yeah.
Ramping up how unlikable he is, it kind of set a bar for other shows of, okay, you can have your character be this horrible, but people will still go along the journey if the story is there.
Yeah, kind of like forgot how early on Walt kills Crazy 8, but it happens like very early on in the show, so he's showing you right there what, you know, how far he's willing to go. And for some reason, on my first go watching the show, it's like I almost didn't want to believe it, because I wanted to believe this image that he was presenting of himself. So yeah, it's in a lot of ways. Yeah,
well, especially like, he seems such a good, but then like after he kills him, like he kind of just mentally moves on too, and so you kind of realize like it's really, even at this early stage, it's not that big a deal for him.
Yeah.
The show gives you a lot of reasons to not like Walt, but for some reason, how they present it, you still keep wanting to follow the story. You don't hate him, but just in the first 3 seasons, there's some pretty big moments that, this is a bad person doing horrible things. But it just sucks you in. But I think part of it, like one of my favorite things about this show is the attention to detail throughout. And I think it starts with the writing, and that Vince really, I just call him Vince now, but he...
Best friends.
You guys like Snapchat each other?
I think it's because I always want to call him Vince Jillian, because of his connection with Gillian Anderson. But
If he is Snapchatting you, tell him to hook up with CPU, tweet at CPU podcast, whatever. We'll put him on the show. I'm doing what Sarah normally does.
He just wouldn't let little plot holes, or not even a plot hole. Like, everything was airtight. The chain of events, the situations that the characters would get themselves in, and how they got themselves out were believable. I think that's part of it too. Even though there are parts along the show where you could have checked out on the character Walter because he's doing bad things, the show doesn't say, but that was a stupid reason for it. Like, the show doesn't give you a reason to stop watching the show. And that's one of that just attention to detail throughout the whole production. But anyone else have anything in general? Have more specifics.
Well, I agree with what you just said, and it's kind of rare too. I mean, yeah, there's lots of great TV out there. Obviously, this is why we do this thing. But at the same time, though, I still feel basically everything that everybody's saying. Like, there's so many things, so many foreshadowing things, so many there are so many hints that are dropped, little flashbacks and flash forwards, and it's like, but everything is important and necessary. It leaves you hanging on the edge of your seat. Like, yes, we're talking about the characters a lot, but you want to know what's going to happen next event-wise as well. Like, you feel like you have to know. Just
one of the details, so at one point, I was like, whoa, does Marie only wear purple and buy purple things? So much that I Googled why and there's this whole breakdown of why each character wears what color and when that color's off, and fans exploding because, wait, they shouldn't have been wearing yellow in that scene based on all this. Like, but she probably is the most consistent with the purple, but the color Walt wears when he's more in his Heisenberg role as Walt and back and forth, and Skylar with blue, and even Hank has, they all have their colors, and it's just the whole production, every detail is perfect. It's just one of the best created shows from beginning to end.
I know for me, as the novice, the newbie, the rookie, the not quite broken into the bad, but breaking, I'm breaking. That's immediately what I noticed as well. I also am a big X-Files fan. Actually, it was one of our very first few panels because there's so many lovers of the X-Files, and there are so many people, Vince Gilligan primarily, of course, but others that are involved in the production side, and there's a reason why that show was excellent, and if you haven't watched it and you're a big fan of these people, you should. And there's a reason why this show is excellent. There was a lot of details that they had to rein in on the X-Files, which they mostly did successfully most of the time. We don't have to talk about season 9. But when it comes to Breaking Bad, it's like they perfected their craft. They sanded off the rough edges and they stitched it all together. There's a lot of mapping, like Hillary said. One of the things that I really marvel about, I already mentioned, is the pacing. It's just so even. Those little spikes of intensity, they are following a crescendo, and the little intensity blips are the ones that are like, oh my gosh, something is about to happen, or is happening, and what is it? And then you kind of realize it as it's happening, and it doesn't really fully land in your, I guess, TV viewing consciousness until after you've processed it. And then it really is like, what did I just watch? What was I just watching? And it does train you to think that certain characters are one way and other characters are another way, but then it adds on a lot of multi-layers throughout each and every season, where it makes you question your initial presumptions and form new presumptions, and then it makes you question those. And that is really good television. That demands that you don't turn off your brain. You have to pay attention to what you're watching. But it rewards you for that attention. It isn't one of those shows that puts a lot of questions out there, like in the Lost mold or even the Game of Thrones mold, without answering the questions. They give you answers. They're just not maybe the answers you were expecting to get along the way.
I can honestly say, and this is a random time to put this in, but like you were kind of mentioning, you're almost reacting to it first and then processing it after the fact. There were literal times where I was having reactions to it, like some people react to football games. Like I was like, oh, that type of thing. And that continued to get more intense in the later seasons, again, which we'll talk about later. But still, it continued on and it got more intense. So.
Oh, good. Something to look forward to.
Yes, if you think it's intense now, sorry, girlfriend.
To piggyback off of what Hillary said with that feeling of, football game intensity, where you're like, oh, why did they do that? Or
exactly.
you're going crazy over something. That always happens to me with one particular detail in that show, and that is I've never seen a show that in almost every episode, they pick the perfect time to either go to commercial or end the episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the cliffhangers are like, oh my gosh.
They're masterfully done. Each cliffhanger, each time those credits come up on that screen, you're like, no! You need to know what happens next.
But it's not in a way where you feel cheated out of something.
Right.
It's not in a way of like, oh, we'll come back next time. It's
like
even feel like
you do a bag of Oreos, and you want there to be one more Oreo.
Yeah.
But instead it says directed by Vince Gilligan. And you're just like, well, that stinks. I still love Oreos, but where are they?
So they give you a salad basically instead of an Oreo. They're like, okay, here, you've had your fill.
For me,
Get some
when it
roughage.
comes to love and hate with Breaking Bad, I love everything, obviously. But when it comes to hate, I don't like all the people who bag on Walter White. I thought he was a mensch. I loved him from the beginning and identified with him on a level that was far too frightening.
You're a sociopath.
But I'm just
Revelations on this episode.
I'm just like...
Why are you openly admitting this? This is going on the internet.
I was like, this guy makes a lot of good points.
Sure.
No, I mean, but really, honestly, it's just like you're watching him, and it's presented, because we've all touched on it in our own way, but it's like, it's presented in such a way where, he is a sociopathic monster, but you're still going, I can see it. Given the same options, would I use my super chemistry teacher brain to make amazing meth? Would I do it?
Honestly, this is
yes,
not
by
a
the way,
question
yes.
I paused on.
Part of that, what makes Walt work is that they so brilliantly created the villains, make them all different and so horrible that
Villains.
you really want Walt to succeed. I mean, look at all the Salamancas.
Villains.
Yeah, because the people who are worse than him are like so infinitely worse that you're just like, see?
I have to say, you're giving people the willies, Nate.
I'm thinking we should be seeing different sides of the same coin, but I'm not hearing that from the bottom of my screen.
I have to say, as good as Walter is and as well done as Bryan Cranston makes him, I find myself inevitably and always drawn to the three same characters. One is Jesse, one is Gus, and one is Saul. With Mike kind of, because he's part of that triangle. I really like Mike too, but he kind of does.
And they'll fill him in.
Yeah,
you're still in the part where he's still kind of small. But
he's kind of small. We're getting a little bit. We've seen him interact with a granddaughter at the end of season 3 and that kind of thing. But he's clearly intriguing. Like, I want to know more about Mike.
Yeah, I would like a Mike show, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, how caught up are you on Better Call Saul? It's 50% Mike, 50% Saul.
I know, and that's the sweetness. Yes.
I would I can't say anything because it's going to reveal too much.
Yeah, it's hard. But yeah, Mike, you get so much more of. You know more about him than you know about Walt and Jesse.
It's true. It's true. I would like it. I guess I'd like a show of him as a young man.
Right.
That would be awesome.
Right.
That would be
fighting
cool.
Mike. Yes.
Yeah. That would be cool.
Christ.
Maybe we should break it down by season now.
We can do that. We can do that. So this is how it's going. This is going to work. I'll just give you some high-level plot to remind you of what your boundaries are. What you're going to do is tell me about the season, what you like, what you didn't like. You should give me a favorite episode and a least favorite episode if you have one. I hope you looked at that. I know I certainly tried to, although I'm going to have trouble because I'm like, I don't know, maybe this isn't my favorite yet. Maybe I have to see more.
Yeah, this is kind of a rewatch question.
So, season 1 is really how it all began. It's 7 episodes because, of course, if you know the story, they had a plan for a larger season, but the writer's strike of 2007 kind of impeded upon that, so they filmed the 7 they had, and actually, they were planning a whole different direction for the show, but because of those 7 episodes, it kind of steered them and pivoted them toward what we got in season 2. So that's very interesting. But we learned that Walt has stage 3 lung cancer. Never smoked. Don't know how he got it. He has this cancer though. His family's deeply in debt and still trying to get out of it. So he's worried about their financial future. And when he accompanies his brother-in-law Hank on a ride-along to a drug bust, and on that ride-along gets the idea that, hey, he knows chemistry. He can make crystal meth, but he doesn't know how to sell it. So he remembers this chemistry student he had once upon a time named Jesse Pinkman. And he goes and asks Jesse, hey, be my partner.
Jesse happened to be at the place, at the...
Yeah.
Oh, at the drug bust.
He was
Right.
there.
Exactly. Yeah. And then says to him, basically, if I can cook it, will you help me sell it? And a partnership was born. In the meantime, we also meet Skylar, his wife, who's pregnant with Holly and trying to rustle up treatment. We meet Marie, who likes to steal tiaras. We meet Hank's friends, who I cannot remember what their names are. One is played by Jessica Hecht, who was Susan on Friends. That's how I know. I was like, it's Susan.
Gretchen is Walter's friends.
Gretchen and Elliot.
Gretchen and Elliot. Thank you very much. And then we also meet, of course, Walter Jr. He's not quite Flynn yet, but the whole purpose of this is they buy the RV, they cook in the desert, they try to sell, and they enlist the help. First, they try to enlist the help of Crazy 8, as Julianne mentioned. That doesn't work out so well. So then they find this other guy, and his name is Tuco. And though his part is small, his family is large, as we come to learn in subsequent seasons. So, tell me about season 1.
Okay, first off, we just got to talk about on the pilot. I mean, the show opens with Walt in the desert outside the RV in his underwear.
Boxers. Briefs.
Yeah.
It's tidy whitey.
Tidy whitey.
Standing, pointing a gun, and he looks scared, S-less, like waiting for the, like he hears sirens coming at him. I mean, that's how the show opens, people.
Yeah.
Like, if that doesn't tell you anything, I mean, I'm just going to say, like, Kylie...
That opening made me think I might have accidentally turned on Malcolm in the Middle, though.
That is fair.
But, like, Kylie...
That is fair.
No, that is fair. It's funny. But, like, when we were all sitting around the table, it was, like, at the holiday or something, and Kylie goes, you said this. You said, when does the show get good? And I almost, like, crapped myself. Because I was like, first off, you're being judgy.
Don't judge me.
But like, literally, just with that scene alone, like, how can I
had questions. I had intrigues. I wanted to know why he was doing that, but
That's not what you said.
No, that's not what I said. I kept it summary.
Called out.
Look, sometimes things have to warm up to people, and we will get there. I can tell you when I warmed up.
Underwear doesn't get you warmed up. I don't know what will. I mean, come on.
A hearts moment?
No.
You You might have to explain that inside joke. She lets Stephen Amell and David Tennant, and she goes, hearts.
And Jensen Ackles, and Daniel Gillies. Who's number 5?
You can mute yourself to finish that list.
It's okay. The point is, no, not on Breaking Bad. Nobody meets that list this time. I mean, Aaron's okay. It's fine. But there are points when people connect with the show. Mine was later. Yours was in the first 30 seconds. Good for you. Continue.
Well, I was going to add to that. A lot of times when I recommend this show to people, and they say, oh yeah, well, I watched up until a certain point, and then it just got really, heavy really fast, and it's usually at the second episode when they're dissolving the body.
That was very
I'm like,
gross.
if you're out at that point, I'm really sorry, but there's a lot more.
Then it's good that you did leave. Yes.
Yeah, but I always feel like when I talk to people and they stop, that's always the point where they stop, is at episode 2. I'm like, no, you gotta keep going.
Yeah, I guess what is wrong with us, because I'm like, what, they're dissolving a body? Now, what's gonna happen?
In their defense, if they can't handle that, they probably shouldn't watch the rest of the show anyway.
Right, exactly. That's that is a good litmus test. If that bothers you, get ready.
Wait.
To my credit, I kept going, and that's not in my happy place.
Yes, Kylie gets
no.
squeaky.
I watch American Horror Story. I don't know why. Sarah and I have this conversation every episode. Why are we still watching this? Because things happen.
Right.
It's the whole
good
thing. It's fine.
Yes.
Anyway, Breaking Bad.
Anyways, I think Kyle was even just saying, because I quickly rewatched the first 3 seasons, because even though I've watched it multiple times, it's been a blip. And I think he even mentioned that, there was the writer's strike, and they had far less of a budget. I mean, it is on AMC, and it was kind of, I think, a little bit experimental. So even just what they were able to accomplish with the first season in those 7 episodes is really impressive, I think, because they're laying the groundwork, as many shows do, in that first season.
Wasn't one of the things they were going to do in the first season was kill Jesse off? Yeah. He was supposed to be on season 1.
Finale.
Oh.
And then they realized that their whole relationship was the heart of the show.
And then
would have been a big mistake.
So, are we still covering favorite and least favorite?
Do you want to know the point at which I did connect to the show?
What?
Go ahead.
It's when they meet with Tuco with the very first big batch of crystal meth, and he identifies himself as Heisenberg. And I was like, what? Where did you pop Heisenberg out of your brain just now? And I was
he went in there with the plan.
I know,
that's
clearly.
my favorite episode, because that's when he is he is capable of navigating this world better than Jesse. And then you also see his brilliance with the sneaking in the fulminated mercury.
Yeah.
And
that's episode 6.
He's pretty much just matching Tuco's craziness with his own craziness, and he comes out on top. For me, that is when I realized how crazy the show is going to get, and definitely it's the high point of season 1.
That's my favorite episode as well, and I also like the fact, I don't know if he wears the hat the first time in that episode or in the following one.
It's the following one when he's meeting with Tuco in the junkyard, and then they quickly realize they're in over their head.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing to me that in such a quick space of time within the show structure, he has created a whole persona with a costume. And you almost expect a small mustache and maybe a...
Or is it a persona?
Right, exactly.
Well, then the funny thing is, the first time you see it, even Jesse makes fun of him, it's over the top disguise. But then through the course of the series, they make him scary in that disguise. It completely loses every little bit of humor it had at the beginning.
It's like he's Batman. He's really being himself when he's got the mask on.
But, not the same, because...
No.
The opposite.
The opposite.
Some would say it is the same.
I know, you think he's a mensch. We'll explore that in a second.
I will say my least favorite episode from this is Cancer Man, when they...
Oh, that's what I said too. We did not talk about this.
To save money, they have the whole Jesse at his parents' side plot to save money. And I know they're supposed to be horrible people and unlikable, but I hate almost every scene that Jesse's parents are in.
I mean, it's supposed to be hard to watch, and it is.
Which is why in season 3, when he screws him over with Saul Goodman and gets his house back, it's such a high point. But the first episode with them, I have a hard time watching.
Well, because you're already starting to learn why Jesse is the way that he is.
Yeah, it's an important episode, but I just hate those characters so much. It's hard for me to watch.
Right. They're definitely not the parents, like, if you had a sleepover at Jesse's house when you were in, like, the 8th grade, you'd always hope you would never run into the parents when you went to the fridge for a soda.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that is, like, they're just, like, just off-puttingly too straight-laced. One of my favorite episodes is actually episode 2. The part when the guy comes crashing through the floor. I laughed out loud because of just, like, it was the most tropish, almost sitcom level, because he was just like, I didn't use a plastic bin, I used a cup. And then it was
like,
just...
I was, like, dying, like, seeing Walt's face.
He breaks through the ground all mucky muck, and I'm just like, and I literally guffawed and slapped my knee. Because I
and Walt's punchline to that is just, like, the perfect end of the episode.
Yeah. Just like, I used the tub. Scablorsh.
See,
like when they make too much rice on that episode of I Love Lucy.
That's the same. I'm only gonna say it's brilliant, but it's also super gross, so I have to put that as my least favorite. I mean, to my credit, I pushed through, unlike some of the people who quit when Julianne recommended, but it is also when they melted with acid, so it's really... The bathtub falling through, very funny. Everything up to it, I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
What did I get into?
So dark.
It does show, like, you know, for as intense as this show gets, and as heavy as it can get, there is definite humor to it. There's humor in some of the characters, obviously. You know, Saul Goodman, there's a lot of humor with the way Bob Odenkirk portrays him. There's a lot of dark humor. I mean, earlier in that episode, Jesse's got the tub, and he, like, sits in it to see if a person could fit inside of that plastic thing. So,
he's like, Walt's getting high. He calls him Walt's getting high, and he's like, did you ever think of buying 2 tubs?
Then there's plenty of little moments like that of dark humor throughout the series, and even some, like, outright silliness and absurdity that help with the levity. But overall, it still is just very dark tone.
Well, that is the magic of Walter and Jesse together, because Jesse is, most of the time, the comic relief. And even though he has some very tragic moments too, as we're going to be discussing when we get into subsequent seasons, there's a lot of just his execution of certain lines and the fact that he calls everybody bitch all the time, and just, you know, even the lobs that he tries to throw at Walter, which sometimes catch him off guard, but then sometimes Walt has a rejoinder right back. I mean, if it wasn't for that, I think I would struggle personally with the darkness, but they do keep it balanced, so.
That's why they needed to bring that character along.
In terms of the first season, one of the great things about it is that that's the most innocent you see Walt and Jesse throughout their progression of the story. And it honestly lets in some of the lightest humor possible that the show can bring you. I really appreciate how they layered on the endurance level for the viewer, you know, with the progression of each one. And the first season's great about being as light as it can be considering the content and material. My favorite episode has to be episode 3, and the bags in the river with the incident with Crazy 8. The reason why, and there are episodes that are very similar in all 3 seasons that are my favorite, and it's for one particular reason, and that's whenever Walt and Jesse are in a near life and death situation, that's when you see what they are truly capable of as criminals in this enterprise. That's when you see them at their darkest. That's when you see the most clever sides of them come out, because they have to think really quickly on their feet. And, you know, it's interesting the lines they draw as to what's good and what's bad. Like, you know, selling meth in the first place was not a problem for them at all. And basically indirectly killing and poisoning a bunch of people with this stuff that they're making. But when they actually have to get their hands dirty and they need to think their way out of a situation that involves life or death,
Yeah, like they flip a coin. Yeah.
Right. Like, it's so interesting to me that is where that becomes the focus of the one thing that they hate to do more than anything else, despite the fact that they're doing all of these other terrible things. And so I really like those episodes dive into the gray area, for all of that, with Walt killing Crazy 8 basically out of self-defense. And, the aspect of just, so many right and wrong questions get thrown to you as to what you would do in that situation. Nate obviously leaning more towards lessons he learned.
But what is cool about that episode, I don't mean to sound like Jeff Goldblum right there, but you know what's great about that episode? is in that episode, it's the first of a few times it comes up in the dialogue where people kind of challenge Walter. Because Crazy 8's like, you just don't have it in you. You can't do that. This isn't who you are. And Walter, it's like he starts to go into goes into these dark places out of spite. Because he's almost just like, oh yeah? Well, not only am I going to go crazy, but I'm going to choke you to death with this bike lock. And so it comes like this, there's those moments that come up that we'll see later in the series as well, where there are just those few moments where it's almost like he does not, like, Walter White in his own hubris does not like to have his intelligence challenged or his meter challenged in any way.
Right.
So
Narcissist.
You're not evil enough to do this. He's like, well, hell, let's just find out. And comes through in spades, nails it, knocks it up.
That was Nate.
Yeah, I mean, it's the first real taste of it, but yeah, that's part of the crescendo is that every time that's answered. For Walt, it always ends up coming to that same answer. It just gets more intense as it goes on.
Yeah.
Say, in addition to Walt's intelligence being challenged, oftentimes something that triggers him is when his masculinity is challenged and when his ability to provide as a man for his family is challenged. Especially when you put him up against Hank. And so I was thinking about when the episode in this season where Walter Jr. gets caught trying to buy a beer and calls Hank instead of calling Walt to pick him up. And any time Walt's, it's almost like that effect of Marty McFly being called chicken.
That's what I was going to say!
Yes! Like, it's like this automatic trigger of like, and I mean, even later on, Gus says the same thing to Walt, and that's what pushes him to get back into the business. It's anytime his masculinity is challenged, that's what really sets Walt off almost more than the intelligence factor, because Walt already is very secure in his intelligence.
That's episode 5, Gray Matter, by the way, is when...
Yeah, and that one is, I would say, is my favorite of season 1, and I don't know if I would say that the first watch through, but watching through again, Gray Matter is, I think, my favorite just because I really like hearing more about how Walt came to be. And so you see him at this party, him and Skylar are kind of like overdressed for it, and everybody's in beige, and, he should fit in among these people. He should fit in because of his intelligence, and he knows that he doesn't. And then his pride is challenged when he realizes he's getting the job offer because of his health situation. And him and Skylar have that fight outside, and that to me is like you can see Heisenberg in that even.
So isn't part of that,
because it's Elliot's birthday party.
Yeah, isn't part of that backstory that he was part of forming this company with Gretchen and Elliot, and was in a relationship with Gretchen, and that went south somehow, which I don't think has yet been revealed in the first 3 seasons, unless I'm...
It's never revealed. You just know there's bad blood,
okay.
But she doesn't even know it. She doesn't know why. It's something Walt came up with in his head, in his narcissism.
That is implied in the last conversation that they have.
But you do find out that all their patents are entirely based on his research.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of he's already walking into that party with wounded pride, and then it's just compounded by the fact that Skylar has sort of orchestrated this conversation where they offer to pay for his treatment as well. Speaking of... Yeah. Speaking of Skylar, she is a controversial figure amongst the Breaking Bad fan base. So it's funny how passionately Nate came to Walter's defense. Are you in defense of Skylar, or are you one of the haters?
I mean, you're right about the internet community really, like, with a Viritol, to the point that they went after her on Twitter as if the very talented actress is Skylar. I don't hate her that much.
Calm down, viewers.
There were times where I think, pull back a little, Skylar. Wait, can I say that part yet? Well, I won't go too big, but I'll just say, there were times where it's just, come on, let the man make some money to provide for his family. He thinks he's going to die.
I'm going to say the opposite of that. I am going to say that knowing, again, when you are married, you have a very intimate relationship, obviously, with another human being, whoever that may be. And when you know, I didn't hear what you just said.
Whoever that is for you.
Ultimately, after a certain point, especially with the events that take place in those first 3 seasons, there are definitely times where she is not innocent herself, and we can always get into that later. And that becomes more prevalent, again, in the latter seasons. But when it initially starts off, she basically comes to realize how much she's being manipulated and lied to. And it isn't just so simple as, oh, you're providing money for the family. Because at the end of the day, I think she's one of the first people, knowing Walt as well as she does, to at least realize that in many ways he's doing it, like, that's just his front. Like, in the end, that's not really what it ends up being about. That's how he justifies it in the beginning. What? Spoilers.
I already know.
I know, it was a joke. Okay. I tend to, especially at least in these earlier seasons, because she's on this whirlwind herself, and everything around her is changing so quickly. And definitely she has her faults, and definitely she's on his ass probably more than she needs to be in certain scenarios. But I tend to kind of sympathize with her situation, at least in those first couple of seasons.
So I have a question, because I've been pondering the Skylar question. So I did not like her at first. First time viewer, don't know what happens. Skylar struck me as somebody who was very keyed up most of the time for reasons I couldn't quite fathom beyond the financial stress that the family was under. And then with Walt's cancer and all that other stuff, just kind of breaking that branch a little bit for her. And then she starts, what was interesting to me is how quickly she suspected that Walt was lying when he answered the phone, and she learns from Hank after he does the phone trace that nobody dialed the phone that he actually owns, that the only explanation could be he has a burner phone or a second phone, and how quickly she trusted that and did not trust him. And I thought, wow, that was quick. And I couldn't understand how she went from point A to point B so quickly. And then I'm starting to wonder if maybe that marriage isn't toxic when we walk into it. She kind of enables him in a way to feel like he has to go the path he goes, but by the same token, he enables her more toxic traits as well. I know this is heady and I'm not all the way through the series, but that's where I'm sitting right now. And of course I've watched other seasons and I've warmed up to her, because at this point obviously she's justified in why she was suspicious. It just was very quick, that suspiciousness. I thought, wow, no benefit of the doubt there. Just, yes, he must have the second phone.
Well, I think part of that is coming from, at least the way I perceived it, was just that, she still has enough trust in Hank as her DEA brother-in-law, law enforcement individual, to trust his perspective on it, and she already knew that something was off as it is. There was already foreshadowing to that. And again, when you know somebody to that depth and you know something's off for a while, you're just inclined to... That's the way that I perceived it, though, just because she obviously trusts Hank's knowledge on the subject, but that's just me.
All the way. totally justified in every reaction in every episode. No, in all honesty, Skylar, there's one point that has not been brushed up on yet, and that is the fact that we go into this marriage with Skylar however many months in pregnant that she is. Right?
7.
So
the podcast people, listeners, cannot see your fingers. 7
months pregnant at like 40 years old.
Okay.
woo! Crazy. And so when we go into the marriage, we get that. On top of the fact that they've already raised a disabled child together. So I don't think we see the level of stress that is initially there with them that they don't really show yet. What's that?
I just took it as it was, I agree with that. There is a level of stress there that's kind of already implied.
Yeah, that they don't really show because they're very sweet and, kind with each other and initially, and we really don't see that underlying tension, but I think it is there, and Skylar expects automatic full support from him from day one because they've already gone through this. They've already had a child together, and I bet when they had Walter Jr., he was there 100% at her beck and call, never avoided her, never did anything like that. So I think because he was just such a timid and kind of loyal puppy dog kind of guy as we see him treating her initially. And I think to even see this, and when I first watched it through, I was the same way. I was like, chill out, Skylar, no big deal. It's like, give him his space, yada, yada. And then I'm like, wait a minute. He's probably never shown any sign of this to this level. Of avoiding her, of being secretive, of not being on top of her constantly while she's pregnant, like in her condition while she's pregnant.
Like he's gone most of the time.
Yeah, so I initially watching it, sure, there were moments where it's the same way with Marie too, where you're watching Skylar and Marie and they do a great job playing sisters because you can see they have parallel parts of their personality that you're like, oh, yep, they definitely came from the same parents. You think that character is so well acted initially that you think they're really annoying because they're doing such a good job. And then once you get a chance to go back and kind of think about it, you're like, you know what? It really wasn't. They weren't acting so outlandish when you get the full scope of everything that was going on.
Yeah.
Okay. I can buy that. It was interesting to me because when I was watching it at first, and all of that makes perfect sense, but I did go on to the interwebs, and I was like, so what do people think of Skylar? Because Marie already comes off a certain way, and it's funny because with her, I kind of expected to get more depth to her as we go along, and we do. Right. But Skylar, I guess because her first impression is so strong, that it almost kind of cements you into a place like, whoa. And then then her reactions get stronger until she finally learns the truth, and then that's when it flips on its head again, and when your expectations and presumptions are subverted. So it was just interesting to me. I like her now. I mean, I'm more along for the ride now, second and third season, but just wanted to ask that question. Is there anybody else who didn't list go ahead, Kylie.
There's something I want to bring up so I don't forget it, because I want to bring it up later, seasons 2. It's my absolute favorite Breaking Bad little Easter egg that most people don't notice. Every time Walter kills somebody, he takes one of their character traits. So in this season, we see the very first one. Crazy 8 hates the crusts on his sandwiches. And earlier, we see Walt eating a sandwich with his crust on. After he kills him, every time he's making a sandwich, all the way up until the final season, he cuts the crusts off.
Yeah, there's several times in season 2.
And then in these following seasons, I'll point out the other ones, but yes, every time he kills somebody, he takes one of their little personality quirks, and then he takes it into his own personality, and I love that. And it's one of those things like, you don't notice it, and then once you do, you rewatch all the seasons just to find them all.
Well, that's more than narcissism. That is more than narcissism.
That's what he's doing. It's his trophies. Instead of taking actual trophies from the people he kills, he steals their traits. And it just adds this whole other level to makes him scarier to me.
Aw, that's sweet.
In some ways, they keep living.
Keep living.
What'd
What a
you say?
way to remember those people, Walter.
Hates on this. He's planted the flag. Devin, what did you say?
I just said that he keeps their legacy going by taking on those parts. That's so sweet of him.
See?
He's a better person than I realized.
These are revelations I wasn't expecting. Is there anyone who hasn't mentioned a favorite or least favorite episode that wants to?
No.
Well, then since we are starting to go towards season 2, let's just keep driving along that track into season 2. So in season 2, things get more complicated, obviously.
What?
What? First of all, they have a run-in with Tuco, and this run-in, I don't even know how to set this up properly in 10 words or less.
Tuco is a psychopath.
Yes, he drags them back to his...
And things happen.
Yes.
Skinny Pete, they need a new drug connection. Skinny Pete takes Jesse to Tuco, and Tuco is super unhinged. And has a lot of territory.
And his Tio happens to be a possibly current, most likely former member of a Mexican drug cartel. So, and...
Salamanca.
Don Hector.
Yes, only speaks with a bell because he can't otherwise speak. And this confrontation is paralleled with the fact that Hank is on the hunt for who's creating the blue crystal meth and is suspecting Jesse Pinkman and has tracked his automobile to this man's house, the result of which is a shootout where he kills Tuco while Walt and Jesse are watching in the brush. Not so far off.
And the first mention of the cousins, who become very important.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I noticed that mention of the cousins, because I was like, oh man, these are the cousins. But that's in the different season. And then, along down the way, they have to find new distributors or decide how they're going to distribute, and they decide to take the business on themselves. So Jesse brings in Badger and Skinny Pete and a third combo. That's right, because he dies. Spoiler.
Combo, rest in peace, dog.
Brings them in for independent distribution, and they do so well that they decide to expand their territory, which is very unfortunate because there is a part of the cartel has the territory over the border in Albuquerque, and that leads to violence. And then, which is the combo, by the way, and then later on, they search for Walt searches for yet even a new distributor. Jesse, in the meantime, has moved into this, he's been kicked out of the house that used to be owned by his aunt, but is still owned by his parents, who know he is still on drugs, and so they kick him out, they evict him from this place, he's homeless, but with some sale of the drugs, he ends up renting a place next to who had become Jessica Jones in the future, Kristen Ritter, who plays Jane, who happens to be a recovering addict herself, and whose father is Q, played by John Delancey.
I was going to say, she used to be in apartment 23.
Yeah, she is.
Okay, that means Jessica Jones is more in my thing than the B in apartment 23.
I like snarky people.
I understand. That's why you work well on these panels. So that's all happening, and Jesse and Jane form a relationship, but that relationship eventually becomes a little bit circular and toxic because Jesse gets Jane back off the wagon.
Good stuff.
The wagon, yes. Heroin and crystal meth, and then he does heroin for the first time. It's a whole thing. And then Walt gets into business with Gus, played by Giancarlo Esposito, who I'm very excited to talk about because he's amazing. And then the very end of this season, there's a huge plane crash because Jane overdoses while in bed with Jesse because Walt comes in to... They're going back and forth over the money that Jesse believes that Walt owes him. They get that money. Walt comes back in to basically... I don't know why he came back in, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. You can fill in the blank. But he turns Jane over. She chokes in her sleep and overdoses. He runs away. Jesse's broken up. The father is very sad, and he turns out to be an air traffic controller and is so affected by Jane, who he's walked through rehab and anonymous meetings and everything else, that he does not direct the plane traffic, and it explodes over the sky of Albuquerque. And that all happens in season 2.
Yeah.
Third 14
Not
episodes.
a lot.
Not a lot.
That's what happens when you get 3 times the episodes of the first season.
At least, yes.
It is chock full of nuts, more like chock full of intrigue. Yeah.
Yes, Nate.
This is the season where we kind of see that Walt is like a virus, and he pretty much is poised. Like everything he touches is destroyed, and you see that in this domino effect ending with the plane crash.
Well, again, that season opens up too. All you see is the black and the white.
And the pink tent.
Again, it's that cinematography. It's in Walt's backyard with the pool, and then you see a little eyeball get sucked into like the pool like filter thing, and then like a pink teddy bear at the bottom of the pool, and you're like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, you're like, what is this gonna mean? Like the whole
it's genius.
Yeah.
I should also mention that it is first in this season that we meet Saul Goodman, because they better call Saul, they need his services. And
That's my favorite episode for obvious reasons.
Yes.
And we
Same.
also meet Mike, because they have to involve Mike to kind of clean up after them, particularly towards the end of the season. And they're trying to also launder their money, because by now they're making the big bucks with their involvement with Gus. And that all revolves around purchasing a laser tag establishment, which might be one of the funniest parts I've seen. Laser tag. So continue.
Yeah, as I say, for me, Better Call Saul, the name of the episode where they introduce him, to me, it's my absolute favorite episode of Breaking Bad. It has the humor. Everything with Badger and the cops is so hilarious. And then obviously Bob Odenkirk is a genius, and like just having him as like a guest character, because he wasn't going to be as big of a character as he was going to be. Same with Mike. It was supposed to be Saul in that episode, but he was filming a movie, so then they just created the character of Mike. But everything about that episode is perfect. It also shows like Walt's ingeniousness, like when he's tricking Hank during the stakeout. Like the whole episode, it's not dark. It's like kind of fun and funny and constantly moving, and that's kind of how the series Better Call Saul feels more like.
Yeah.
Bob Odenkirk, if you are listening to this,
tweet at CP Podcast.
Can you call my husband, because he's obsessed with you as an actor and your performance and your character, like for real. Do me a solid. Call him.
Well, just this whole episode, that whole episode is brilliant, and not going into spoilers for Better Call Saul, but there's the scene in the episode where they have Saul on his knees with the fake grave, and he spouts out just quick lines that sound like nothing, like, it was Ignacio, did Lalo send you? It's something about cartels in Spanish. And that is the entire plot line of Better Call Saul, the 5 seasons we've seen so far. And you're getting it as just like this gibberish that for the entire run of this show means nothing. And then the writers somehow fill it into this amazing plot. It's brilliant.
And that's why you're going to have him moderate that other one.
Correct. Obviously, there is a passion.
He won't need
To stay on Bob Odenkirk a little bit, this character could have been really easy to play into the comedy so much that it's annoying and doesn't fit into the show. And Bob Odenkirk, while he is known for being just a masterful comedic actor, he plays it so well, both sides of it. And you need it so much, especially in this season with the Jane storyline and the plane going down at the end. Like, that really balances the show out. The show is well balanced, well written.
Yeah. The Better Call Saul episode is a much needed sorbet halfway through this season.
We got a whole meal going on over here.
Yeah, it is. It cleanses the palate nicely because so much dark stuff happens. That is why it's also my favorite episode. Plus, Bob Odenkirk is a genius. I'm not going to run out of IMDb, but yeah, just comedic genius, and the timing and everything is all there. And he really brings it nicely.
And that's why I love that character so much, is he just seems like this cheap, suited, smarmy, ambulance-chasing lawyer, and everyone discounts him, but most of the time he's the smartest person in the room. Same reason why I love Mike, too. He's quiet and gruff, but he's also almost always the smartest person in the room. And it just goes on with this whole idea that none of these characters are who they seem.
Yeah, we're going to keep saying this. This is the trope of the episode of where later on, you find out when you get to know Mike more, just like how he is truly a master detective, and the fact that he's just a cleaner It's just because the money's good. He's clearly like he could have easily, like, they could do a whole series of him being a Sherlock Holmes level detective easily. He'd rather just be quiet and write.
He just has this workman-like attitude. Like, nothing in this world phases him. He doesn't care. He's just doing a job to get paid.
Get up. You go to work every day. You come home.
Just the fact that this season immediately starts off with the whole Tuco thing. Like, again, only a show like Breaking Bad can pull that off.
Yeah.
I mean, good Lord. So many things happen in those first 2 episodes. Gosh. And, I mean, we haven't really talked that much about Hank, but he's a very, obviously, brother-in-law DA agent, but he's a very big driving force as to a lot of those scenarios that I think maybe it was Devin that was saying that they get into those situations, you're going to see how far they're going to go to get out of it. And that's like one of the first big moments of that, like when you were describing it, because obviously Hank figures out where Jesse's Monte Carlo is, and you're like, oh my gosh, they are totally going to get found out right now. It's going to happen. And somehow, again, out of some, like, just the series of events that occur, they manage to get out of it. And Tuco sees his demise. But that whole episode, I mean, it goes back to that intensity.
Well, and that's also the first time, because in the first season, Hank seems like he's one of those guys who's kind of a jerk that's all talk.
Yeah.
Once you actually see him tracking them down, once you see this more of the DEA side, that how good at his job he really is.
Yeah. He's a good cop.
It's a million times more interesting.
And the thing of it is it's not that he's just a good cop, but he's a good cop. Because it's so easy in, like, especially a show like this, where all the characters all have this deep-seated repulsiveness to them, with the exception of Walter. You can, like, he could have been on the take. He could have been skimming. But no, he was really out there fighting for the greater good.
He's almost the opposite of most characters, where you kind of don't like him, the way he talks to Walter, and then the more you get to know him, it's the flip side.
I mean, the whole first season, they make him so unlikable. Like at Walter's birthday party, and he's making it all about him. He turns on the news to the story featuring him, and like you just instantly like, wow, this guy is a grade A jerk.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I love about Hank's character. Hank is one of my favorite characters in this show, especially the arc that he goes on in the show. And really, this is the season where it begins for him, because he seems so one-dimensional almost in season 1. And then, with this, him killing Tuco, he didn't come off of that scot-free as far as the PTSD goes. Right. But in his job, he's so praised for it. And so then, he continues on. And because of his own ideas about who he has to be for his job, he doesn't want to say that he's been affected by it. And then it, gets to that episode, the one right before Better Call Saul, and I'm glad that it was mentioned that it's a much needed, that the Better Call Saul episode is a much needed break as far as the humor factor goes, because the episode before it is the one where the head on the tortoise blows up. And it's one of these like major moments that's like, so I remember the first time I watched that episode, I was just so shocked by what I saw. And to Dean Norris's credit, the way that he embodies that shock and the revulsion and the disgust at seeing the tortoise, and then you don't expect that it's going to escalate past that, and then the head explodes, and it's like, wow, like we have seen what the world that Walt is really getting into, and Walt really still, maybe he has this fantasy idea, but I mean, I don't know, that episode to me. Oh no, go for it.
Oh no, I was going to say, you made a really good point. I mean, you're seeing the world around both of them, and you are seeing how Walt is reacting to it, and Jesse, and you are seeing the way that Hank is reacting to it. And Hank, who was already in the throes of the PTSD from the earlier scenario, then, because like you said, he needs to keep going on, all that, and then he sees all that happen. He sees so many of his coworkers obviously injured and really badly hurt and worse from that. And it continues to compound on him, and yet ultimately he is still that good man. Like nothing is affecting him, but then you see it from the Walt side of it, and you're like, it does not nothing. And it's just drawing more, it's just, for lack of a better word, triggering whatever is already underlying in Walt, and obviously it's compounding it for him as well, but in a different direction.
Couple of notes. The episode that Julianne referred to as episode 7, Negro y Azul, Black and Blue in Espanol, and the person who played Tortuga was Danny Trejo.
Danny Trejo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was actually still intimidated by beheaded on a turtle Danny Trejo, just as much as if I were to make honest to God living breathing Danny Trejo.
Everyone said he says he's like the nicest person ever.
He's really nice, and he's surprisingly short.
Yeah, that's what
I ran into him at a Comic-Con, just on the con floor, and I was dressed up as a Flash character on the season, and it just happened to be the season that he was on, so he stopped me to talk for a second.
Oh yeah, that's right. I remember that.
Oh, that's cool.
That's dope.
But he's awesome. He's a big nerd, just like us.
Yeah, but there's that small part. I'm just like, I've seen too many of your movies, Danny Trejo.
I want to say that my favorite episodes in this season are the Better Call Saul episode, just because there are very few characters that get quite such an introduction, and that was I'd already had all the billing from Kyle about Saul Goodman, but I was like, okay, he lives up to the hype, great. And then the other favorite episode that I enjoyed was Mandala, which is episode 11, we meet Gus. The only exposure that I had to Giancarlo Esposito before watching Breaking Bad, even though this came first, was as the magic mirror on Once Upon a Time. So I really had no concept of this man's nuance and brilliance at acting. And this is a character that I need to know everything about. The very first
season 4.
I'm very excited. The very first moment that he came on screen, I was like, "Oh my gosh, there's something about this guy, and I have to know what it is."
This is all the more reason why you have to watch Better Call Saul.
I will. It's all part of the series. Yeah, I got to do it.
Yeah, it's better to do that. I think you'll pick up on those things in Better Call Saul so much better once you get the full scope of the story.
One Easter egg is if you go to the AMC app, you can actually watch, they have like videos hosted by Gus as if you're a new hire at the restaurant.
That's awesome!
And they also have all of Better Call Saul's commercial, or Saul Goodman's lawyer commercials, ones that they didn't show on the TV show, and they're hilarious.
Yeah, they're so good. It's just like it got like, I never heard about it. I just happened to be on the app one day, and I was like, this is gold that is, just sitting here collecting dust. It's well done. Like the part where he talks about not being on your cell phone at work, because he's like, somebody is always watching. Like I felt like I was getting yelled at. Like, it was that good. It was very intense.
So for me, season 2 is probably my favorite season in seasons 1 through 3 at least. I think they just didn't waste a single minute with the entire season. A lot of those episodes are, I really can't, maybe I'm missing it, but I can't recall any filler in those episodes, like just from season 2 at least. I really can't. But my favorite episode would definitely be the second one, when they're stuck with Tuco in the desert.
I'm thrilled. Yeah, I put that in mind.
Yes, I like that it's it's Tuco's last episode, and I really appreciate that actor gave it his all to really give that character as much life as he could for the time that he had.
He is very memorable.
Oh, so memorable. He's not on screen for that long, and yet you will never forget when they were with Tuco in the desert. It was just so tense and terrifying. Me, personally, I've been around drug addicts who are like that before, and the amount of tension and horror I felt was very real, because I felt like I was just back in those sketchy rooms with those people who are unpredictable, wild, and you have no idea what they're going to do. I really like how it's one of the first glimpses for Walter into what his product does to people. And, the kind of just insane logic that comes from these people's brains after they've been using this stuff for a certain period of time. And it's the same reason I have my favorite episodes in each season. It's just, they really have to think super quickly on their feet. You know, the scenes where he's getting ready to poison Tuco with the burrito and the ricin. I mean, my God, you know, almost no dialogue until Tuco starts talking. And every moment, every second just feels that much more tense because of just how quickly it has to go and, you know, how much they have to improvise. Yeah, I really, that was a standout moment for me in the season, definitely.
I should also mention, I should also mention that in the season finale, episode 13, ABQ, Skylar has revealed that she's investigated all of Walter's lies a little bit deeper and gets him to admit some of the truth.
Yeah.
And she leaves him. She separates from him.
Great monologue from her, by the way. Oh my God, Anna Gunn killed it in that scene.
Yeah, I agree.
Phenomenal.
Especially since it's like after a time jump. So she's known this stuff for a while and has been acting normal while he's recovering from his surgery, and then she just like lays it on him like a bomb. Like, you're not this brilliant liar you think you are. I know everything.
Yes.
She just drops a bomb on him.
It's delayed, but Raymond Cruz, who plays Tuco, he's been on a couple X-Files episodes, so that's probably why they used him. Vince used him. That's all.
Okay. Did anybody have any least favorite episodes? Or anybody forget to mention any favorite episodes?
Least favorite is always going to be real tough because they are so interwoven and so well done. Like, least favorite is still a really good. None of them ever stand out as bad. Like in another series where you're like, well, they needed to get 24 episodes in. That doesn't happen in this show. So I don't know if I'll have a answer to that question for any of these seasons. We don't have to talk about it anymore because we already did the Better Call Saul episode because of what we already.
That's your favorite?
Yeah.
Okay.
One of my favorite Hank exchanges is somebody asked him something. And his response was, does the Pope shit in his hat? And then Marie says, no, I really wish you would stop saying it. It is like, I will just randomly think of that sometimes and just laugh to myself, like loading the dishwasher or something. It's cool to me. It's just like a fun, because also when we talk about the dynamic between Skylar and Walter, we talk about Hank being just a good guy, a mensch, a real one, unlike Walter, who I just said that for funsies. But he loves his wife and will do everything to protect her, even though he's this hardened cop who's out there running down drug dealers. When the call comes that he needs her or she needs him, he leaves and goes. He won't miss a moment to be with Marie. So it's a nice dichotomy to show where those two guys are, like we've talked about here quite a bit here in the episode 2 or season 2 part, or series 2, as I like to say because I'm pretentious. Series 2.
Or possibly British. Are you calling them British people?
I believe I said that.
Okay.
Self-awareness is always good.
Hi, viewers
Right.
from the UK. I mean, listeners. So does no one...
Have those two, by the way, have those two done a podcast together? That I would pay to see.
Nate and Spencer?
Yes.
No. But maybe
Oh,
someday.
We must make this happen.
I'll try. So nobody had any least favorite episodes? You're
Not
all...
in this season.
Oh, wow.
No, I was gonna give a shout out to another episode that I love in this season, 4 Days Out, which is the one where they're stuck in the desert, and at this point, Walt is thinking that does not have that much longer to live. And this is the episode just before he receives good news about his health condition. I love that moment that, they really, at least Walt is kind of almost resigning himself to the fact that he's going to die. And he says to Jesse, I deserve this. I deserve everything that happens to me at this point, which is something that Jesse echoes to him later on in season 3. But I love that episode for that dialogue between them. It's also got some good arguments, good old-fashioned Jesse and Walt arguments between them about, Jesse's inferiority of leaving the key in the ignition and stuff like that. And then it also has really great cinematography with just that RV out in the desert, and some of the shots that are in that episode are gorgeous. So that is one of my favorites.
That is a really good episode, and it ties to El Camino more than any of the other episodes too.
It's a big.
I can't get into it until we talk about it, but yeah, that's a very important episode for that movie.
I just like to every time Walt just does use his science knowledge. I mean, he makes the battery at the end it's so silly because that's ultimately kind of...
Well, it also shows how they work together because, Walt has this intelligence, but he's not using it. And Jesse, who doesn't have this knowledge, is he's pushing him and he forces him to think of something, and they're dynamic in a nutshell.
I really enjoyed that episode too, even though I didn't choose it as one of my 2 favorites. I think of all the episodes in season 2, and I don't know that I have a least favorite either, because to me, this is why I asked this question in the talking points. Do you see the story as one big arc, or are you able to separate it along seasons? To me, season 2 is like a grand arc, and there are huge moments and introductions, which is why I'm able to maybe pick favorites, but then there are also other moments that they are just moments. I'm really sad when Jane dies, and it's hard to watch. And even the lead up to the season finale, when you realize why the pink bear was in the pool and all the debris that they've ever focused on, and you're watching, I don't know what his first name is, but Jane's father's faculties Donald. I have to say that, I already know that John Delancey is an amazing actor because I'm a Trekker and he appears on Star Trek The Next Generation and is fabulous there. But what a whole other dimension you get to watch, and it all plays out on his face because it's the camera doing a very slow close-up onto his face as the words are kind of tumbling out and they're starting not to make sense.
They all blend together.
And it isn't to say that I hated that moment or it was my least favorite, but I just recall that it's one of those things that is so brilliantly executed, it's also so hard to watch. Because you're like, oh no, you're watching it happen in real time.
You know what's going to happen, but you can't stop him.
Exactly. And I think that's another commentary on the brilliance of this show. Sometimes you do know what's happening, but you're literally along for the ride and there's no breaks. Unless you shut off the TV, and who's going to do that? Apparently nobody on this panel. So is there anything else you want to say about season 2 before we move into what is my favorite season so far, which is season 3?
This season knew exactly what they're doing, like the whole show, and we get so many episodes starting with shots from the pool, and it's just this slow tease. So many shows have done things like that have fallen flat, and this just delivers so well. And that part of it is on John Delancey for that. This character that's that's his 3rd episode. He only has 1 more, and he knocks it out of the ballpark because everything around him leading up to that point production-wise set him up for it as well.
Well, even giving him that scene with Walt in the bar, which they point to later on in season 3, which is actually one of my favorite Walt monologues that I've seen so far. Just, what's the fate? What's the chance that these two would meet in the way they've met and yet be so interconnected already in a way they don't even realize? And then they're even more interconnected later on down the line. What's going on in Albuquerque? But
in that monologue, it feels like it's the only time Walt's being completely honest and not hiding something or not being a fake persona when he's talking to Jesse about that. That's one of Bryan Cranston's biggest moments in the entire show.
And actually one of the more controversial episodes. So we're going to get there, but let's go to season 3 now. Let's keep it brisk. Let's keep it brusque. So season 3, it starts off with Jesse in rehab. He was very heavily into heroin and crystal meth combined. That's kind of scary. He goes into rehab for the first few episodes of this season. We meet his addiction counselor, who has a recurring role throughout the season. In the meantime, Walter, he starts off convinced that he's not going to get back into the drug trade. But then Gus comes along with an offer he just can't refuse. It's very Godfather-esque without all of, the Godfather bravado that comes with Al Pacino and Marlon Brando. But it's 7 figures for a contract of approximately 3 months, and he gives him this state-of-the-art lab hidden underneath a laundromat where he can cook meth. And he also gives him an assistant. What's the assistant's name?
Gail Bedecker.
Gail Bedecker. And they would seem to work very well together, but Gail, he is a little too by the book and a little shifty. And in the meantime, Walt actually cares about Jesse's future and thinks that he can only cook with Jesse because A, that's what he thinks, and B, I think he thinks he's saving Jesse in that process by giving him something to work on. And then as the season progresses, they get more and more spiraled into a lot of things. These cousins show up because T.O., the Don, he calls them in. He's like, revenge. Revenge. And they only know Heisenberg. They've seen a sketch of Heisenberg. So they're really after Walt until Gus misdirects them and says it wasn't Walt who killed Tuco. It was Hank. Hank Schrader. Go get him. And they do. They don't kill him, though. But they really hurt him badly, and he ends up in the hospital. In the meantime...
And that's a moment where Hank is just super dope because he takes out them.
With no weapons.
It's pretty awesome. And then in the meantime, Skylar, she takes up a job, her old job at Benke Manufacturing, where apparently the son of the former owner has taken over ownership and has been nursing one big old crush, which she just feeds into, partially out of revenge against Walt, and partially because I think she's lonely, and partially because he gives her attention. And so there's all that rolled up into it. In the meantime, Marie is, her niceness is coming through because as Hank gets injured, she becomes big advocate for him in all the ways, down to physical therapy, and they start and Skylar also starts shifting her views on Walt slightly in the sense that she realizes how much money he's making and that it can help Hank when he's seeking his medical bills and so forth. And she even wants to become his bookkeeper in the laundering business. And maybe suggest instead of laser tag, he buy the car wash that he used to work at. Because that makes sense, right?
Much nicer, Skylar.
Yes, she's very practical in this season.
Way to turn it around.
I should say that she did have their daughter Holly in the second season, and there's also a lot of because Walt misses the birth of his daughter trying to get the drug order that Gus needs to Gus. And in this season, there's a lot of jockeying over, does he move back in? He actually tries to move back in. Throws a pizza.
Tries, he did.
I mean, yes, I guess successfully. She wasn't able to fight him successfully. He threw a pizza on the roof. That happened. There was a whole thing. But
which also became an internet phenomenon where they had to come forward and say, please stop throwing pizza onto these nice people's home that we use for the exterior shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ridiculous. But I mean, that just shows the love of the show, though. It's like people are like, I'm going to take a picture of me throwing a pizza on this roof, just like he did.
Beverly Hillbillies all over again.
Be a normal fan. Don't be extra.
Yeah.
Right.
Walt Jr. is going by Flynn. He's learning how to drive and trying to help out with the finances through a perfectly innocent money-raising website as well.
Mm-hmm.
Until Skylar starts to explain away Walt's success with gambling success. So that all happens in season 3, and I doubt I've even really scratched the surface.
That's literally just the surface.
So let's talk about season 3. Favorites, least favorites, general comments.
My favorite, and it's really the most important aspect of this entire world, the building block of this entire world, is the war between Hector and Gus Fring. Yeah. And the way they set it was amazing because they introduced all these characters separate from each other, and you have no idea how interconnected it all is.
Or how deep.
Yeah, or how deep it runs and how it affects everything that's happened and everything on the other show and everything.
And how it's led to Walt, too, in various ways.
And this season is my favorite villains, Lionel and Marco, the cousins, who are just absolutely terrifying in every scene they're in.
Those are sociopaths. Yes, true sociopaths.
I mean, they're just so inhuman.
So as well.
You can't. There's no way you could relate to them on any level.
Yes, even me. I found them unrelatable and scary.
Really?
However, I
That's
would
personal
like them
growth.
as my bodyguards in case anyone is not wearing a mask at Meyer.
Yeah, be a sweet security detail.
They already died, man.
I have nothing to fear then.
Well, just and the way they built them up too, so that when you have the episode when they're coming at Hank and he has no gun and he's in his car and he's at the lowest moment of his life, like he's completely out of it, and they built these characters up so much, and you think there's absolutely no way Hank's getting out of this. And so when he does, it's amazing. It's at great personal cost, but I mean, the very fact that he survives is astounding.
Well, and ironically, at a time when he's made a peaceful decision about his career and all this back and forth between does he go back to Texas, does he stay here to chase down the blue crystal meth, and he makes a very questionable law enforcement decision by he's figured out that there's a mobile drug lab and he's chasing down RVs and he ends up climbing on the roof of the wrong RV. And in the process of that, there's just a lot of missteps that he makes, and he decides at the very end that, you know, he's maybe not going to do all of this. He's going to take a different direction, just as the cousins find him in that parking lot. It literally is the next moment.
It's so that episode 1 minute, that is my favorite episode of this series by far. And it was after Hank attacks Jesse. Hank attacks Jesse. He goes to Jesse's house and punches him in the face, and then he's suspended from the DEA.
Right.
And part of why what sticks out to me about that episode, and especially about the attention to detail and the acting, it's the way that Hank gets the call that somebody's coming for him, and, you know, he's kind of confused by it. He's looking around, and this scene just keeps building all this tension on, like, fast cuts, and you know that Hank has already been experiencing all this PTSD before. And then, you know, he reaches for his gun. He realizes, I was just suspended. I don't have my gun anymore. But that episode to me is just standout, not just because of that scene, although it was obviously badass, the way that, you know, he took down the twins, or the cousin. But also, that is the episode where Jesse is in the hospital, and back to what I was saying earlier of how he mirrors to Walt, saying to Walt, like, I deserve everything that's come to me. But he's also telling Walt, like, you've taken everything away from me. You've taken everything that I've loved away from me. And it's not until Walt turns to him as he's leaving and says, by the way, your batch was as good as mine is, that later on he calls him and accepts his offer to be his assistant again. And on my first watch through of this show, I was really, I don't know, I've been trying to figure out how I characterize the relationship between Walt and Jesse. And the way that I look at it now is I feel like Jesse is addicted to Walt. And I don't see it as a partnership, and I don't see it as a friendship. And I just see it now for what it is, where Walt really will use Jesse and manipulate him and take away everything that he loves to get to his end. And I don't see them as a partnership. That episode is a big reason why.
So I would, like, going back to earlier when I was talking about, like, Jesse and his parents, like, Jesse is, like, yeah, addicted is a way to say it, but he's always in need of Walt's approval, even when he's pissed at him and does not agree with him and is saying, like, whatever, you did this to me, this, and that. He still needs Walt's approval, like, bad. And it drives a lot of his decisions.
He sees Walt as a father figure. He wants him in his life. He wants that approval. Walt treats him, he gives him enough of that relationship to keep him going.
Exactly.
It's a parasitic relationship.
But yeah, on Walt's side, he could flip on a dime if it's against what he wants. Like, he will go out of his way to help Jesse if it doesn't set him back too much.
Yeah.
And I will say, what I loved about that episode is you see Gus as the master chess player, because he sends the cousins at Hank, but he also gives Hank a chance to kill them, which is his real goal.
To get them out of the way.
And then because he wants to get at Hector, but he also needs the border closed from the DEA. So he's getting like 5 different things he wants out of this, no matter how it goes. And you just see that he's operating on this whole level above any of them.
Right. Well, he's a businessman, so he looked at what items he could use to further his business. I mean, he played everyone just like a cog in a machine. He put them all in the right place, and everything ran so smoothly for Gus that it was, just yet another lovable character on this list of characters that we have come to meet here on Breaking Bad.
The reason why this is my favorite season is because we learn about the interconnectedness and how there's like several levels of a chess game going on. Each individual character has a chess game, but then there's the writer's overall chess game that's guiding the whole thing. And I know I was judgy when I first started watching the show, but it was in the 3rd season where the first season I was hooked. It was the 3rd season where I was like, oh my God, this is truly brilliant. This is a lot of thought and planning and care and effort that's being layered into this show. And I spent more time, this is not a show that I can say I binge watch in the traditional sense of the word. I will watch 1 or 2 at a time because I actually need time to process it. But this season particularly, I was thinking about it. Sometimes I was dreaming about Breaking Bad after watching the episodes in this season because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm starting to realize now how this is all going together. And to me, the supporting cast, the main cast is great. The supporting cast shines particularly well in season 3 because Saul and Gus and Mike and all of them start to have, and the Don and everybody else start to have these very meaty, hovering, cloud-like aspects and effects on our main characters that you don't even realize until they verbalize it later, or something big like Hank's confrontation with the cousins happens.
One of my favorite moments out of these series is Mike's monologue about no half measures.
Yes.
Because it echoes through the rest of the seasons in Walt's world. And it just shows you who Mike is. It's the first real glimpse into who he is beyond the gruff enforcer. That he's always thinking, and he has this past. And he's just such a great actor that he just sells it so well.
Is that the episode where he's basically following around and picking up after all of them? Is that episode? And
he's talking because essentially
he goes to their.
Jesse's spinning out about what he finds out about the drug dealers that killed Combo.
Right.
And pretty much Mike is like, you have to get this kid in line or he's going to ruin everything for all of us. And Walt takes it in completely the wrong way and destroys everything, essentially.
That's where Mike goes to Walt's house, and he knows that Skylar's not there because he's been staking them out, and that's where he tells that story about when he was in the force, and he was responding to that domestic abuse call and decided to let that guy go. And then he ended up killing his wife, and that's when he says that line of no half measures. And then Walt really takes that to heart. At the end of that episode.
Very quickly after that.
Great pep talk.
Yep. Great pep talk. All right.
Well, the name of the season finale is Full Measure, so.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Those 2 episodes in particular. I don't know if they're my favorite. There's a lot of good ones in this, and I had a really hard time picking favorites out of season 3.
Full Measure is definitely my favorite.
Yeah, Full Measure is my favorite, too.
I think I like the last 2 as a set, because you do get a lot of Mike in the Measures.
The last moment of Full Measures when they're essentially going to kill him, and Mike's with him, and he's so arrogant because he knows that Jesse's out there going to kill Gale, and pretty much he just spits back at him, you're going to need me to cook, and just the way his narcissism, he's just not even hiding it anymore. It's such a great way to end the season.
Right.
Like, Bryan Cranston deserves his Emmys.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously.
Undo P. My favorite episode was Fly.
That's the controversial episode. I'm glad you brought it up. It in the fandom on the interwebs, it is very love-hate. There seems to be no middle ground. You either love Fly and you completely get it, and you love its existential purpose, or you hate Fly because it drags the pace of the season down. It's just the two of them. They're in it's not a claustrophobic lab, but they're in one room the whole time.
Yeah, they made the episode to save money.
Right.
Because they needed a bottle episode in one location. And it is quirky and weird, but for me, the payoff at the end, it makes the slow build worth it. Like, you see that this stuff is affecting Walt, because by this point, he's a sociopath. You know how much things don't faze him, but then you start to see that there is this stress building up in him and that he needs a release.
Yeah, and a fly is a thing that he can't control.
Exactly.
So it is literally a grain of sand in the ocean, really, when you look at the size of that room and that one fly. But damn it, he wants to find that grain of sand.
It's really all symbolism.
Yeah, and that's what's so great about it, is that you get such a deep look, or deeper, just another level of the rich tapestry that is Walter White. The rich, brilliant tapestry.
And great morals, and, morals.
Generations. Paul Bunyan.
Well, and his self-destructive nature, because he's already on the line with Gus, and he's already finding any little reason to not do the one thing he has to do to make things right.
That's also, it's not my favorite, but that episode pays off for me in such a huge way. And this one feels, I'm going to say it like this, and I don't mean to sound pretentious, but we just mentioned the X-Files, and I know which of the ones he was responsible for. This episode feels very Vince Gilligan. So I was along for it, because I was like, I think I know where he's going. But the monologues at the end were very, very... The whole conversation that they have at the end is what makes that episode so worth it to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Both of them. They both do a great job.
Jesse's face, as Walt's telling about how he met her dad the very night that she dies, obviously not telling him, part of it is you're on edge because you're wondering if he's going to slip up and mention that he was there when Jane died. So there's tension there, but there's so much emotion between the two. It's like Walt being real for a moment and Jesse kind of comprehending the weird cosmic events that made all this come together. I've said it a million times, but they're acting like they deserved every award they got.
Yes, hundo.
Is there anybody else who wants to mention favorite episodes that hasn't?
Full Measure is my favorite episode, but there's just so many moments throughout the whole season that I just love. Even when Hank finally finds them in their RV. That whole freaking thing is awesome. And then, Walt's in there telling Jesse what to say to him, because they're, arguing the legality of whether or not it's okay for Hank to be busting into that RV.
Well, and the great character actor who plays the junkyard owner is great, and I'm glad he's back.
Yeah,
there's just so many moments. I don't really have a least favorite episode in this season either. I'm just gonna say it, but I don't know. I like a lot of the episodes and just a lot of the scenes.
The moment in particular following up that when they're in the RV and they finally get Hank to go away with the fake phone call from the hospital. The scene where the RV's being crushed after that in total silence with that classic Latin music in the background.
Yeah.
About parts in the show that involve music, very heavily. And I can't even describe... Obviously, Vince Gilligan thinks very carefully about what kind of song he wants to pair with that scene, with each scene that he does for that, but there was something about that. I couldn't describe what it was, but that was my favorite musical moment. It felt like it was an indescribable moment to see the RV being crushed in front of them in their faces while they're getting rid of this big part of their past. And that was my favorite. That had to be my favorite moment in the show, I think, where I got hairs on the back of my neck. Because music just does that to me. So it was the combination of that and how the mood was set for that I just thought was perfectly executed.
Well, and that RV was the whole icon of the show.
Yeah.
Star Trek is the Enterprise, and they're showing that the show has moved beyond needing that.
Ooh, truth.
Yeah, it's true. I guess I didn't think it was their enterprise. Yeah, it was. And I guess they were in a way kind of sad to see it go, but they knew that, yeah, they had to move on.
The music sensibility on this show is really... I noticed music too right away. We talked a lot about this on Mr. Robot because there's a similar use of a very eclectic range of music that covers a lot of different genres, and it just seems to hit at certain points and punctuate those moments and those scenes.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't know if there's a particular moment or song. It's funny, there's a sentimental moment where actually there's a Marshall Tucker song.
That's what I was just going to say, because, you don't... So our dad's favorite band was Marshall Tucker Band, and you never hear that. You don't hear them in stuff. And then when they're having that celebration party for Walt's Good News in the backyard, and he's very uncomfortably forcing Walter Jr. to drink tequila, and Hank's trying to be like, dude, stop. Yeah. And again, that's one of those Walt's being challenged moments. Yeah. So that it escalates. But that song's playing in the background, and it's just crazy because, you don't hear that band played in, mainstream stuff like that.
Yeah, I would think the only other time that stands out to me with musical use is Wendy's cut scene while they're playing Wendy in the background. Perfectly executed scene that just sets the whole... It's the juxtaposition between the light, upbeat song and this gritty world she lives in. Yeah, just another perfect execution on his end for progression of the show.
Kind of good scene, like a day in the life of the user of Walt and Jesse's products. How they're spending all their money on this high-grade meth and their lives are completely horrible.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also funny that we mentioned Gale very briefly. He does come back because Gus clearly reaches his end with Walt by the end of the season.
Yeah, it's trained Gale.
Yeah, he's trying to position Gale to take over, basically, but Gale has also a very unique taste in music. So every time we see Gale in his home, it's this... I don't even know what the genre is. It's just peppy, funky, random.
I actually did notice that. The first time he's listening to some classical Latin music from the 30s, which he very excitedly sings along with, as we remember. And then the other time, right before Jesse comes into the apartment, he's playing some weird 1800s traditional Chinese music almost or something, or he is just this... It's very clear that he's a very cultured individual, and we learn so much about him just from those musical choices that he has. And use of music, it's interesting to see use of music done not only done well through the director and the writers, but even through the characters. The kind of music they listen to tells you a lot about them. That's great.
Since we're talking about music, I'll jump back to season 2. Actually, the Ballad of Heisenberg.
Oh my God, I love that so much.
The Ballad of Heisenberg is phenomenal. What's really great about the Ballad of Heisenberg, aside from being a fan, the genre of music that they're doing is very big in Mexico, where they sing the exploits of drug lords as if they are legendary heroes. And so to incorporate and create, utilize a genre of music and create a song about a person who's made up, because if he were real, he would have songs about him. It was just a nice, delicious, meta tiramisu.
And the dessert theme, with the cognitive dissonance of the name Heisenberg sprinkled into this musical tapestry that you just referred to. Yeah. So, it was very random at the time.
It really, the first time you watch that, you're like,
what's going on?
It's very weird. It was very weird and off-putting, but it's also to convey this idea that
it's brilliant.
This name and this costume he created was building a myth, and that by word of mouth, Walt doesn't even know it.
Yeah, he doesn't even know it.
But he's already known by the drug cartels in Mexico, and people are singing about him, and people know what he looks like.
Everyone's seen that sketch.
But he just thinks the cousins put the sketch at a prayer altar so that
to Santa Muerta.
Exactly, so they can give themselves that extra oomph on their hunt for him. So
oh my gosh, it's so dope.
It's so dope. Hashtag Breaking Bad is dope. Ooh, that works on multiple levels.
I'll take.
What I enjoy watching about Kyle is that, like, every time they are showing he's like, look at how many Pop Rocks are in that scene.
Rock candy.
Like, every
time.
Getting
powder blue rock candy in the early 2000s. That was hard to come by.
Is there anything else that we want to mention about season 3?
It's just super awesome. Watch it.
And we can revisit the themes as they come up in the future seasons. But what I want to ask you to close this one out, as we mentioned in the intro, the show is featured on many best of lists, like number 2, number 3, number whatever, top 20 at least. Do you agree with that assessment? And does any of that greatness, in your opinion, come through in these first 3 seasons? So do not tell me about the greatness of the last 2. Do you see the greatness that everybody's raving about in their first 3 seasons?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Absolutely.
I mean, by this point in the show, I already became obsessed with Saul and Mike. And so, like, I kept watching every episode just thinking, okay, Walt deserves to die, but I just want Saul and Mike to survive.
Kyle does not think that Walt is a mensch.
So by this point, like, I was already obsessed, and it was already climbing up into one of my favorite shows of all time.
Absolutely, yeah. You get hooked right away. I mean, yes, the graphic nature is intense, but there isn't a point where people are like, just give it 5 episodes, and then it'll be good. It's like, it's good right away, but sometimes it's just too intense. It was its biggest problem. So absolutely.
That's a fair description.
I think that's why the show took off critically as much as it did, was just because it was so consistent in quality of television that it was bringing you. Even though, there might be shortcomings with some of the episodes and, their budget, and they had to squeeze some stuff in for writing, and, but it's such minimal stuff. I mean, you'd really have to nitpick it hard in order to figure out what's really wrong with it fundamentally, because there's so little that is. I mean, except the dark aspect, you could say, definitely pushes certain viewers over the edge. I mean, it's for a specific taste of, of genres, for people who like certain crime thrillers and everything like that. It's definitely made for people who like darker stuff. That's true.
It would be like, oh, you like Hill Street Blues?
Yeah.
Let me suggest Breaking Bad.
Yeah. If you liked Malcolm in the Middle, let me tell you. So, yeah, I mean, it definitely does appeal to a certain crowd, but if you like anything that is crime thriller related, and you have a decent stomach and tolerance for dark moments and violence, there's very little fundamentally wrong with this show. So I think, yeah, absolutely.
The show has a lot to offer. So if you're someone who doesn't really like the dark elements, which is why maybe, Kylie, you can watch it, is because if you appreciate good acting, if you appreciate cinematography, there's so many, the writing itself, characters, there's a lot that the show can offer someone. It is still, there's going to be a lot of people who won't watch it. That's why I agree, yes, it deserves to be on the best of list. It probably doesn't rank as high on my favorite TV shows of all time, because I play rewatchability into that, the favorite word, but it is one of, if not the best constructed television shows I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of what Nick just said, like, there's a reason why shows like that draw all that attention. Even, I mean, it's been off the air for a while, obviously, and with such the saturated market of TV that it is, and it's more now, but even then, when something pulls that quickly to the forefront, there's a reason for it, and it's because it can transcend all of those aspects to a degree, and there will always be the group that can't handle it, but ultimately, all those other aspects just, they push themselves to the forefront. And so, yeah, like, critically, even up to season 3, or through season 3, I definitely would put it high up on that list. I mean, just for everything that everybody's already talked about. Well, but I think that's why it grew as quickly as it did, was because it was already hitting all of those points and people had to see it.
Well, one of the big things that I talk about consistently on the podcast is continuity. I'm a huge fan of well-observed continuity. To me, it shows the writers are paying attention. I can think of maybe 5 other shows that come close but don't equal the continuity that's observed on this show. There are things that are planted in the earlier episodes that Kyle's already brought them up, Devin's brought them up, Julianne's brought them up, probably everybody's mentioned something, but they blossom into other things later on and make callbacks that you thought you'd forgotten about, but they're big callbacks. They don't let it linger. They're not subtle about it. And it's clear that they've made sure that they're following their own rules. They've set this universe. They've set a scope around the universe with a set of guidelines around the universe. They're following what they did from beginning to end. Now, I'm not at the end yet, but as the progress is going, I'm pretty confident it's going to be. Don't roll your eyes.
Who rolled their eyes?
You.
I didn't.
Okay.
It's just instinctive now. You can't help. Kylie talks so long as your sister. You eventually just have to roll your eyes.
Hey!
You cannot.
This is not time to pick on Kylie. Mo.
That's fantastic. I'm just going to piggyback on what he just said.
No. Veto.
This is my last episode, by the way. Thank you for having me. And
I guess I'll let you come back.
Meeting you.
Is there anything else that we haven't said or gotten off our chest? This is the last, in case we haven't explored certain feelings. Is there anything else that you haven't said that you'd like to say about Breaking Bad seasons 1 through 3?
he bought his family a tankless water cooler.
This was tankless.
Very expensive.
That is
He
very...
put it in himself.
He did. He saved him the
he did self-installation. He bought it. It's eco-friendly. It's easy in the pocketbook. I mean, bench.
I mean, who doesn't think to hide guns and money in their baby daughter's bedroom?
Yes, that's
We've all done it.
One time or another.
True. Okay. Great note to land on. Okay.
R.I.P. Jane? I don't know. Just watch it.
Yeah, I suggest that we explore Walter's other creative hobbies and interests in the next episode, which will also cover Breaking Bad seasons 4 through 5. So what I'd like to do right now is thank Hillary, Kyle, Nick, Julianne, Nate, and Devin for joining me to kick off our Breaking Better series. And because we've done that today, it's now time to roll the credits. Couch Potatoes Unite! Was produced by Back Pocket Productions, run by yours truly, the Chief Couch Potato, which is really another way of saying executively produced by me, Kylie Piette. My associate producers are Krista Pennington and Selene Rezmer. I edit this podcast, and our logo is by Rebecca Wallace. Our marketing graphic artist is Krista. Our theme song was written by Sarah Milbratz and sung by Sarah, Amy McDaniel, and Kels Rezmer. Kels played the keyboard, Ian McDonough played the bass, Christian Somerville played the guitar, and the whole shebang was engineered by Kyle Aspinall and Christian. We hail from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Please, if you like what you hear, take the time to rate us, give us stars, provide comments, or review us wherever you get your podcasts. Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, and Amazon are just a few of the places you can find us, but we're also on YouTube. We have our website, and we're now on Patreon at patreon.com/couchpotatoesunite. If you really love us, pledge your support by becoming one of our United Couch Potatoes as we grow our little sofa-populated corner of the world. Otherwise, feel free to tell us how we're doing, what we should add, subtract, keep, or toss. You know how it goes. And if you have suggestions for shows we might consider, contact us at our website where we have a guest book, by email at couchpotatoesunitepodcast@gmail.com, our Facebook, our Twitter at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, our Patreon, or wherever you get your podcasts. Though, of course, we add new and old shows to chat about around the water cooler all the time, and always have new episodes coming down the pipe. Just listen to our intros. If you miss old episodes or want to know in general what shows we cover, just search for us. Find us wherever you do searchable things on the internet. Don't forget that exclamation point, or contact us via our website, our email, our social media accounts, and our Patreon to stay up on all the new events and episodes by our humble little podcast, Couch Potatoes Unite! Exclamation point. Until the next time, Breaking Bad is available to stream in its entirety on Netflix, our unofficial non-sponsor who hasn't had their people call our people yet. Don't worry, we're working on it. In the meantime, our Breaking Better panel will next reconvene to discuss seasons 4 and 5 of Breaking Bad and part 2 of this Looking Back series very shortly, in fact. So until next time, until next episode, new episodes are published every Wednesday. Keep listening, keep watching, stay tuned!
Bye.